An arrogant surgeon mocked the nurse. Her simple question saved the millionaire's daughter. Hello, viewer. Thanks for joining us. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the city you're watching from. Now let's continue with the story. Dr. Ryan Gray was untouchable, the god of surgery. 38 years old and already chief of cardiac surgery at Chicago's most prestigious hospital. His hands had never failed. His mind had never been wrong. Until today. The millionaire's daughter lay dying in the VIP suite, and 3 weeks of every specialist, every test, every theory had led nowhere. The pressure was crushing his legendary confidence. Then a nurse, a nobody in scrubs, asked the question that shattered everything. One simple observation about a family vacation, Costa Rica, insect bites, water exposure, details so basic they were beneath his genius, or so he thought. Sarah Roberts saved the child's life with words that destroyed his world, but when he looked into her eyes, really looked, he saw something that terrified and intrigued him more than any diagnosis. The woman who would save him from himself. Any epiphany that escaped 30 of the world's best doctors. Dr. Ryan Gray's voice cut through the crisis room like a scalpel, sharp and precise, and designed to draw blood. His green eyes swept the assembled medical team with barely concealed contempt before settling on the young woman who had dared to linger near the conference table. She wore basic blue scrubs, her auburn hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she was holding a tray of coffee cups like some kind of cafeteria worker. Sarah Roberts felt the heat rise in her cheeks as every head in the room turned toward her. 29 of the most brilliant medical minds in Chicago stared at her with expressions ranging from amusement to outright hostility. She had delivered coffee and stayed to observe, something that had never been questioned in her 5 years as a cardiac care nurse. Until now. Well, Ryan continued, his tone dripping with sarcasm. Nurse Roberts, she said quietly, her voice steady despite the thundering of her heart. Sarah Roberts. Nurse Roberts. He made her title sound like an insult. Since you seem so fascinated by our little medical mystery, perhaps you have insights that have eluded Harvard Medical School, Johns Hopkins, and Northwestern University combined? The room was silent, except for the soft hum of the ventilation system and the distant beeping of monitors from the intensive care unit down the hall. Sarah could see Dr. Patricia Chen, the department head, shaking her head slightly, a warning to retreat before the situation escalated further. But something in Ryan's arrogance, something in the way he dismissed her without even considering that she might have observed something important, made her lift her chin and speak. Actually, Dr. Gray, I do have a question. The room collectively held its breath. Ryan's eyebrows shot up in genuine surprise. In his 8 years at Metropolitan General Hospital, no nurse had ever challenged him directly. No one challenged the god of surgery. Is that so? He said, leaning back in his chair with the lazy confidence of a predator toying with prey. Please enlighten us all. Sarah set the coffee tray on the side table and stepped closer to the conference table where Isabella Rodriguez's medical chart lay scattered across the mahogany surface. The 8-year-old girl had been admitted 3 weeks ago with symptoms that defied diagnosis: fever, fatigue, neurological irregularities, and a constellation of blood work abnormalities that had stumped every specialist in the hospital. I noticed in the admission paperwork that the Rodriguez family returned from an ecotourism trip to Costa Rica approximately 3 weeks before Isabella's symptoms began, Sarah said, her voice growing stronger. Did anyone ask about insect bites or contact with fresh water from rivers or streams? The silence stretched like a taut wire about to snap. Dr. James Mitchell, Ryan's chief rival in the department, let out a short laugh. Are you seriously suggesting we miss something as elementary as travel-related parasites? We ran comprehensive panels, added Dr. Susan Walsh from Infectious Diseases. Everything came back negative. But Sarah noticed that Ryan had gone very still, his sharp green eyes fixed on the admission form she was pointing to. She watched as he reached for the paperwork, his long fingers tracing the small print section about recent travel. The initial intake questions were limited to immediate exposure risks, Sarah continued, her heart pounding but her voice steady. But Costa Rica has several endemic parasites that require specific testing protocols. River water exposure, particularly in the Osa Peninsula region where they stayed, could indicate Naegleria fowleri or other amoebic infections that would not show up in standard parasitic panels. Dr. Chen was now studying the admission form as well, her expression shifting from warning to intense focus. What specific tests are you suggesting? Lumbar puncture for cerebrospinal fluid analysis, specific staining for amoebic trophozoites, and PCR testing for Naegleria fowleri, Sarah said, reciting information she had memorized during her nursing education. Also, skin biopsy from any bite marks that might still be visible, tested for cutaneous leishmaniasis. The room erupted in murmurs as the implications sank in. Ryan was staring at Sarah with an expression she could not read, part shock, part calculation, and something else that made her stomach flutter with nervous energy. "Those are very specific recommendations," Dr. Mitchell said slowly. "What makes you think of Naegleria fowleri specifically?" Sarah felt every eye in the room focused on her, but she forced herself to continue. Isabella's neurological symptoms, the altered mental status, the seizures that respond poorly to anticonvulsants, the progressive cognitive decline, they match the progression pattern for primary amoebic meningoencephalitis. Combined with the timeline from fresh water exposure in an endemic region, it fits. Ryan set down the admission form and stood up slowly, his 6'2" frame towering over the conference table. For a moment, Sarah thought he was going to destroy her with some cutting remark about nurses overstepping their bounds. Instead, he said quietly, "Dr. Chen, please call the lab immediately. I want lumbar puncture scheduled within the hour, with specific instructions for amoebic staining. Dr. Walsh, contact Infectious Diseases at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and request their Costa Rica Endemic Disease Protocol. Dr. Mitchell, coordinate with Neurology for emergency consultation." The room exploded into motion as doctors began making phone calls and giving orders. Sarah stood frozen near the conference table, unable to believe what was happening. Ryan walked around the table until he was standing directly in front of her, close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his green eyes and smell the faint scent of his expensive cologne. "How did you see this?" he asked, his voice so low that only she could hear it. Sarah felt her breath catch in her throat. The question was not asked with his usual arrogance or condescension. There was something vulnerable in it, something almost desperate. "I read the whole file," she said simply. "Not just the medical history, but the personal history. The family details. Isabella is not just a collection of symptoms. She is an 8-year-old girl who went on vacation with her parents and brought home something dangerous." Ryan continued to stare at her for a long moment, and Sarah felt as though he was seeing her for the first time. Not as a nurse or a subordinate, but as a person with thoughts and insights that might actually matter. "Dr. Gray," Dr. Chen called from across the room. "The lab is ready for the lumbar puncture. Isabella's parents have given consent." Ryan broke eye contact with Sarah and turned back to his team. "Let's move," he said, his commanding voice restored. "If Nurse Roberts is correct, we have very little time to save this child's life." As the medical team filed out of the conference room, Sarah remained behind, her hands shaking as she began collecting the empty coffee cups. She had just challenged the most arrogant surgeon in the hospital and somehow survived the encounter. More than survived. She might have actually helped save Isabella's life. But as she loaded the cups onto her tray, she could not shake the memory of that moment when Ryan had asked her how she saw what 30 specialists had missed. There had been something in his eyes, something that suggested the god of surgery was not as infallible as he pretended to be. And something about the way he had looked at her made her think that perhaps, for the first time in her nursing career, someone was actually interested in what she had to say. The laboratory results came back at 11:47 that night. Sarah was finishing her shift documentation when Dr. Chen appeared at the nurses' station, her usually composed expression showing signs of exhaustion and something that looked remarkably like excitement. "Nurse Roberts," she said quietly, glancing around to make sure they would not be overheard. "Could I speak with you privately?" Sarah's stomach dropped. She had been expecting this conversation all day, ever since the scene in the conference room that morning. Word traveled fast in a hospital, and by lunchtime, everyone was talking about the nurse who had dared to challenge Dr. Gray's medical judgment. "Of course," Sarah said, saving her computer work and following Dr. Chen into the small office behind the nurses' station. Dr. Chen closed the door and turned to face her, and Sarah was surprised to see that the older woman was smiling. "You were right," she said simply. "Negleria fowleri, confirmed by PCR testing. Isabella Rodriguez is alive tonight because you remembered that she is a little girl who went swimming in a Costa Rican river, not just a medical puzzle to be solved." Sarah felt her knees go weak with relief. "How is she responding to treatment?" "Remarkably well. The antifungal protocol was started immediately, and her neurological symptoms are already improving. Dr. Gray expects a full recovery." Sarah nodded, trying to process the magnitude of what had happened. "I am glad she's going to be okay." Dr. Chen studied her for a moment, her dark eyes thoughtful. "Ryan asked me to find you. He wants to see you before you leave tonight." "Doctor Gray wants to see me." Sarah's voice came out higher than she intended. "He is in his office, 3rd floor, surgical wing." Dr. Chen paused at the door. "Sarah, what you did today was extraordinary, not just the medical insight, but the courage to speak up when everyone else was intimidated into silence. That kind of advocacy for patients is what nursing is supposed to be about." After Dr. Chen left, Sarah sat alone in the small office for several minutes, trying to calm her racing heart. She had been expecting disciplinary action, not praise, and certainly not a private meeting with the man whose arrogance she had challenged in front of his entire department. The elevator ride to the 3rd floor felt endless. The surgical wing was quieter than the rest of the hospital at midnight, most of the operating rooms dark and empty. Ryan's office was at the end of the corridor, and Sarah could see light spilling out from under his door. She knocked softly. "Come in." Ryan was sitting behind his desk, still wearing his surgical scrubs from Isabella's treatment, his dark hair slightly disheveled, as if he had been running his hands through it. When he looked up and saw her, something shifted in his expression. "Nurse Roberts," he said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. "Please, sit down." Sarah perched on the edge of the chair, her hands folded in her lap. The office was impressive. Diploma-covered walls, medical journals stacked neatly on bookshelves, and a large window overlooking the Chicago skyline. Everything about the space spoke of success and authority. "I wanted to thank you," Ryan said, his voice lacking its usual commanding edge. "Isabella's parents are beside themselves with gratitude. Her fever broke 2 hours ago, and her cognitive function is returning to normal. I'm glad she is recovering," Sarah said carefully. Ryan leaned back in his chair, studying her with those penetrating green eyes. "How long have you been working in cardiac care?" 5 years, Sarah replied, "since I graduated from the University of Iowa nursing program." "Iowa," he repeated. "You are from the Midwest. Cedar Rapids." "My father worked at the Rockwell Collins factory until he passed away 6 years ago. My mother was an elementary school teacher." Sarah was not sure why she was sharing personal information with him, but something about his direct questions made her want to answer honestly. "Working class family," Ryan said, and there was no judgment in his voice, only acknowledgement. "You understand what it means to work for everything you have?" "Yes, sir." "Do not call me sir," he said, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "We are colleagues." Sarah felt her eyebrows rise in surprise. 8 hours ago, he had been treating her like she was invisible. Now he was calling her a colleague. "Dr. Gray," she began, but he held up a hand. "Ryan," he said. "Please, Ryan," she repeated, the name feeling strange on her tongue. "Can I ask you something?" He nodded. "Why did you listen to me today? Everyone else thought I was overstepping, but you actually ordered the tests I suggested. Why?" Ryan was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming against the surface of his desk. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than she had ever heard it. "Because you were the only person in that room who was thinking about Isabella as a patient instead of as a problem to be solved," he said. "You saw her as a real child with a real history, not just a collection of symptoms. That kind of perspective." He paused, searching for words. "That is something I need to learn." Sarah stared at him in shock. The god of surgery was admitting that he needed to learn something from her. "I have been thinking about our conversation all day," Ryan continued. "About how you read the whole file, not just the medical data. About how you remembered that she is an 8-year-old girl who went on vacation with her family." He looked directly at her. "I want to understand how you think about patients. Would you be willing to help me with that?" "Help you?" Sarah repeated, not sure she had heard correctly. "I would like you to review some of my current cases with me, particularly the complicated ones where we might be missing something obvious because we are too focused on the complex possibilities." Ryan leaned forward slightly. "I realize this is unusual, but what happened today convinced me that I need a different perspective on patient care." Sarah felt as though the world had tilted off its axis. The most arrogant surgeon in the hospital was asking for her help with his cases. "I would be honored to help," she said slowly. "But I do not understand why you are asking me specifically." Ryan was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, there was something vulnerable in his expression that made her heart skip a beat. "Because you saw what 30 specialists missed," he said simply. "And because when you spoke up today, you were not trying to prove how smart you are. You were trying to save a little girl's life. That kind of motivation, that is what medicine is supposed to be about." Sarah felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. In 5 years of nursing, no doctor had ever acknowledged that her insights might be valuable. Most barely knew her name. "When would you like to start?" she asked. "Tomorrow afternoon. I have 3 complex cases that have been frustrating me for weeks. Maybe your perspective can help me see what I am missing." Sarah nodded, trying to process the surreal nature of the conversation. "I will be here." Ryan stood up and extended his hand to her. When she shook it, his grip was firm and warm, and he held her hand just a moment longer than necessary. "Thank you, Sarah," he said, using her first name for the first time. "For Isabella, and for reminding me that being a good doctor means more than just being technically proficient." As Sarah left his office and walked back toward the elevator, she could not shake the feeling that something fundamental had changed between them. The arrogant surgeon who had dismissed her that morning was gone, replaced by a man who seemed genuinely interested in learning from her. She pressed the elevator button and found herself thinking about the way he had said her name, the vulnerability in his voice when he admitted he needed to learn something from her. There had been something in his green eyes when he looked at her, something that made her stomach flutter with nervous anticipation. The elevator doors opened, and as Sarah stepped inside, she realized she was looking forward to tomorrow afternoon in a way that had nothing to do with professional development and everything to do with the man who had asked for her help. Sarah arrived at work the next morning to find the entire hospital buzzing with news of Isabella Rodriguez's miraculous recovery. The 8-year-old girl was sitting up in bed, laughing with her parents and asking for chocolate chip pancakes. The transformation was so dramatic that several nurses had stopped by just to witness it for themselves. "It is like watching someone come back from the dead," said Marcus Williams, the charge nurse who had become Sarah's closest friend during her years at Metropolitan General. Yesterday, she could barely recognize her own parents, and today she is complaining about the hospital food. "Whatever you suggested yesterday saved her life." Sarah was checking Isabella's morning vital signs when Eduardo Rodriguez, the girl's father, approached her. She recognized him from newspaper photographs, one of Chicago's most successful real estate developers, worth an estimated $50 million. But standing beside his daughter's hospital bed, he looked like any other worried parent. "Nurse Roberts," he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "Doctor Gray told me that you were the one who figured out what was wrong with Isabella. The medical team worked together to solve the diagnosis," Sarah replied diplomatically. "No," Eduardo said firmly. "Dr. Gray was very specific. He said that you asked the question that saved my daughter's life. He said that while 30 specialists were looking for zebras, you remembered that sometimes the answer is horses." Sarah felt her cheeks flush. She had not expected Ryan to give her credit with the family. "I'm just glad Isabella is feeling better," she said. "My wife and I would like to do something to thank you," Eduardo continued. "Perhaps a donation to a charity of your choice, or—" "That is very kind," Sarah interrupted gently, "but seeing Isabella healthy is thanks enough." Eduardo studied her for a moment, then smiled. "Dr. Gray said you would say that. He said you are not in this for recognition or reward. You are in it because you care about the patients." After Eduardo returned to his daughter's bedside, Marcus raised an eyebrow at Sarah. "Dr. Gray has been talking about you quite a bit, apparently. That is interesting." "What do you mean?" Sarah asked, though she could feel her heart rate increase slightly. "I mean that in 5 years, I have never heard Ryan Gray give credit to anyone else for a medical breakthrough. Ever, the man is legendary for taking full credit even when other doctors contribute significantly to a diagnosis." Marcus leaned against the nurse's station, but according to half a dozen people who were in that conference room yesterday, he made it very clear that you deserved the credit for saving Isabella's life. Sarah tried to focus on updating Isabella's chart, but she could not stop thinking about her conversation with Ryan the night before. The vulnerability in his voice when he admitted he needed to learn from her perspective, the way he had said her name. "Sarah," Marcus continued, his tone more serious, "just be careful, okay? Ryan Gray is brilliant, but he is also known for being ruthless when it comes to his career. I do not want to see you get hurt if this attention is just a temporary thing." Before Sarah could respond, she heard a familiar voice behind her. "Nurse Roberts." She turned to find Ryan approaching the nurse's station, looking impeccable in his white coat, despite having worked until nearly 2 in the morning. His dark hair was perfectly styled, and his green eyes were alert and focused. "Dr. Gray," she replied, trying to keep her voice professional, despite the way her pulse quickened when he looked at her. "I wanted to follow up on our conversation last night," he said. Are you still available to review those cases this afternoon? Of course, Sarah said, aware that Marcus was listening to every word of their conversation. Excellent. Could you meet me in conference room B at 3 o'clock? I have pulled the files for 3 patients who have been particularly challenging. I will be there, Sarah confirmed. Ryan nodded, then paused as if he wanted to say something else. Also, I spoke with Isabella's parents this morning. They're very grateful for your intervention yesterday. I was just doing my job, Sarah replied. No, Ryan said firmly, his green eyes intense. You were doing much more than your job. You were advocating for a patient when everyone else, myself included, had gotten too caught up in the medical complexity to see the simple answer. Marcus was staring at both of them now, his expression fascinated. It was extremely unusual for Dr. Gray to have extended conversations with nursing staff, particularly conversations that involved admitting his own limitations. I will see you at 3, Ryan said, then turned and walked toward the elevator bank. As soon as he was out of earshot, Marcus grabbed Sarah's arm. Okay, what exactly happened in that conference room yesterday? Because the Ryan Gray I know does not admit mistakes. And he certainly does not ask nurses for their opinions on complex medical cases. Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks. He just wants a different perspective on some difficult diagnoses. Uh-huh, Marcus said skeptically. And I suppose it has nothing to do with the fact that he has been asking 3 different people about your educational background, your work history, and whether you are dating anyone. He has been asking about me. Sarah's voice came out higher than she intended. Oh, honey, Marcus said with a knowing smile, the god of surgery has noticed you in a big way. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Sarah spent the rest of her morning shift trying to focus on her patients, but her thoughts kept drifting to her upcoming meeting with Ryan. She had reviewed the hospital's policy manual during her lunch break and confirmed that there were no specific rules prohibiting professional collaboration between doctors and nurses. But she also knew that a cardiac surgeon asking for a staff nurse's input on complex cases was highly unusual. At 2:45, she made her way to conference room B, carrying a legal pad and trying to calm her nervous energy. The room was smaller than the main conference room, where the crisis meeting had taken place the day before, with a round table that could seat 8 people and a wall-mounted monitor for displaying medical imaging. Ryan was already there when she arrived, 3 thick patient files spread across the table in front of him. He had removed his white coat and rolled up the sleeves of his blue dress shirt, and Sarah tried not to notice how the fabric emphasized the muscles in his forearms. Thank you for coming, he said, gesturing for her to take the seat beside him rather than across the table. I hope you do not mind if we work closely together. These files contain quite a bit of information. Sarah settled into the chair next to him, very aware of his proximity. She could smell his cologne again, something expensive and masculine that made her stomach flutter with awareness. Where would you like to start? She asked, trying to focus on the medical files rather than the way his presence seemed to fill the small room. Patient number 1, Ryan said, opening the first file. Margaret Chen, 62 years old, presenting with chest pain that does not fit any standard cardiac profile. We have run every test imaginable, but her symptoms do not match her test results. Sarah leaned forward to study the file, accidentally brushing against Ryan's arm as she reached for the papers. She felt him go very still beside her, and when she glanced up, she found him watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. Sorry, she murmured, trying to focus on the medical data. Do not apologize, he said quietly, his voice rougher than usual. Sarah forced herself to concentrate on Margaret Chen's case history, reading through the admission notes and test results. but she was intensely aware of Ryan beside her, the way he leaned in when she pointed to something in the file, the warmth of his body when their shoulders touched. "What strikes you about her presentation?" Ryan asked, his voice back to its professional tone. Sarah studied the notes for several minutes, trying to see patterns that might have been missed. Her symptoms seemed to correlate with stress events in her personal life rather than physical exertion, she said finally, and her pain descriptions are very specific. She uses words like crushing and suffocating rather than the typical cardiac pain descriptors. Ryan nodded slowly. "Go on. Has anyone talked to her about her emotional state? Recent losses, major life changes, family stress?" "We focused on the physical symptoms," Ryan admitted. "What are you thinking?" "Takotsubo cardiomyopathy," Sarah said. "Broken heart syndrome. The chest pain and cardiac symptoms are real, but they are triggered by severe emotional stress rather than coronary artery disease." Ryan stared at her for a moment, then flipped through the file until he found Margaret's personal history. "Her husband died 3 months ago," he read aloud. "She has been having increasing symptoms since his funeral." "The timing fits," Sarah said, "and it would explain why all the standard cardiac tests are normal. Her heart is physically healthy, but she's experiencing real cardiac symptoms from grief." "That is brilliant," Ryan said, looking at her with something like awe in his green eyes. "Completely brilliant. We were so focused on finding a physical cause that we never considered the emotional component." Sarah felt a warm glow of satisfaction at his praise, but she tried to keep her expression professional. "What about patient number 2? They worked through the second case together, and then the third, with Ryan asking probing questions and listening intently to her observations. Sarah found herself relaxing into the collaboration, excited by the intellectual challenge and surprised by how well they worked together. "You have a remarkable gift for seeing the whole patient," Ryan said as they finished reviewing the third file. "Most of us get so caught up in the medical complexity that we forget these are real people with real lives affecting their health." "That is what nursing school teaches," Sarah replied. "Holistic patient care, treating the person, not just the disease." "Medical school should teach the same thing," Ryan said quietly. "But somewhere along the way, we get trained to see patients as puzzles to be solved rather than people to be healed." Sarah looked at him curiously. There was something vulnerable in his voice again, the same tone she had heard in his office the night before. "Can I ask you something?" she said. He nodded. "Yesterday in the conference room, you were so dismissive of everyone who was not a doctor. But today you are asking for my perspective and treating me like an equal colleague. What changed?" Ryan was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming against the conference table. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft and honest. "I realized that my arrogance almost cost Isabella her life," he said. "I was so convinced that the answer had to be something complex and rare that I dismissed the possibility of something simple and obvious. You reminded me that good medicine starts with really seeing the patient, not just the symptoms." He looked directly at her, and Sarah felt her breath catch at the intensity in his green eyes. "You saved that little girl's life because you cared enough to see her as a whole person," Ryan continued. "That kind of compassion and insight, that is what I want to learn from you." Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. The way he was looking at her, the sincerity in his voice, the vulnerability he was showing, it was so different from the arrogant surgeon she had challenged yesterday. "I would be happy to continue working with you on difficult cases," she said, trying to keep her voice steady, despite the emotional undercurrent flowing between them. "I was hoping you would say that," Ryan said, his lips curving into a small smile. "There is something else I wanted to ask you." "What is that?" Would you be interested in joining my research team? I'm working on a study about patient advocacy and holistic care approaches in complex medical cases. Your perspective would be invaluable." Sarah stared at him in shock. "You want me to join your research team?" "As a full partner," Ryan said firmly. "Not as an assistant or a data collector, but as a co-investigator. Your insights today have convinced me that this research needs a nursing perspective from the beginning, not just medical input." Sarah felt tears prick at her corners of her eyes. In 5 years of nursing, no one had ever offered her the opportunity to be involved in medical research as anything other than a data collector. "I would be honored," she said, her voice slightly unsteady with emotion. "Excellent," Ryan said, his smile widening. "We can discuss the details tomorrow. But Sarah—" He paused, using her first name again in that way that made her stomach flutter. "I want you to know that this offer has nothing to do with what happened with Isabella yesterday. This is about your abilities and your perspective. You have earned this opportunity." Sarah nodded, not trusting herself to speak without her voice betraying the emotions swirling through her. As they packed up the patient files, Sarah could not help but notice the way Ryan's hands moved, precise and careful, the way he organized the papers with methodical attention to detail. Everything about him spoke of competence and control, but there had been moments during their conversation when she had glimpsed something softer underneath the professional facade. "Sarah," he said, as they prepared to leave the conference room. "Yes, thank you. For today, for yesterday, for reminding me what good medicine looks like." "Thank you for listening," she replied. They stood there for a moment, looking at each other, and Sarah felt something shift in the air between them, something that had nothing to do with medical cases or research partnerships, and everything to do with the way Ryan was looking at her, as if he was seeing her not just as a colleague, but as a woman. Then the moment passed, and Ryan stepped back, his professional demeanor restored. "I will have my assistant send you the research protocols tomorrow," he said. "We can meet again next week to discuss your role in the study." "I look forward to it," Sarah said, and she was surprised by how much she meant it. As she left the conference room and walked back toward the cardiac care unit, Sarah realized that everything had changed in the space of 24 hours. She had gone from being an invisible nurse to being recognized as a valuable colleague by the most respected surgeon in the hospital. But more than that, she had seen glimpses of a different Ryan Gray, a man who was capable of vulnerability and growth, a man who was interested in learning from her rather than simply commanding her. And the way he had looked at her in those brief moments when his professional guard had dropped, Sarah tried not to think about it, but she could not shake the feeling that something was beginning between them, something that went far beyond professional collaboration. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of patient consultations, research planning meetings, and extended conversations that had very little to do with medicine. Sarah found herself staying late most evenings to work with Ryan on their research protocols, and she was surprised by how much she enjoyed their collaboration. Ryan was nothing like the arrogant surgeon she had first encountered. When they worked together, he listened to her ideas with genuine interest, incorporated her suggestions into their research design, and treated her as an intellectual equal. More than that, he seemed genuinely curious about her thoughts on everything from patient psychology to hospital administration. "You have a remarkable understanding of institutional dynamics," he said one evening as they reviewed survey questions in his office. "How did you develop such insight into organizational behavior?" "Nursing school includes management training," Sarah replied, curled up in the chair across from his desk with a stack of research papers in her lap. "But mostly, I just pay attention to how things actually work versus how they are supposed to work." "That is a valuable skill," Ryan said, leaning back in his chair. Most doctors are completely oblivious to the politics and power structures that actually run a hospital. Most doctors do not have to navigate those power structures the way nurses do, Sarah pointed out. You give orders and expect them to be followed. We have to figure out how to get things done within a system that often works against us. Ryan was quiet for a moment, studying her with those intense green eyes. Is that how you see me, as someone who gives orders and expects blind obedience? Sarah hesitated, not sure how honest she should be. But something about the way he asked the question, the genuine curiosity in his voice, made her decide to tell the truth. 2 weeks ago, yes, she said, you had a reputation for being brilliant but difficult, arrogant, dismissive of anyone you did not consider your intellectual equal. And now? Ryan asked quietly. Now I think you are still brilliant, Sarah said, meeting his gaze directly, but I also think you are capable of growth and change in ways that surprised me. The man who asked for my help with those cases is not the same man who dismissed me in that conference room. You changed my perspective, Ryan said, his voice soft, about patience, about medicine, about the value of different kinds of expertise. There was something in his tone that made Sarah's heart skip a beat. They were sitting in his office at 9 o'clock at night, alone except for the security staff, talking about personal growth and professional respect. But the undertone of their conversation felt like something much more intimate. Ryan, she began, then stopped, not sure what she wanted to say. What is it? He asked, leaning forward slightly. Can I ask you something personal? He nodded. Why did you become a surgeon? What drew you to medicine? Ryan was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming against his desk in the gesture she had come to recognize as a sign that he was thinking carefully about his answer. I wanted to save people, he said finally. My younger sister almost died from a congenital heart defect when I was 16. I spent 3 months watching her go through surgery after surgery, watching my parents fall apart with worry. The surgeon who finally repaired her heart, he was like a god to us. He had the power to give my sister her life back. Sarah felt something tighten in her chest at the vulnerability in his voice. Is that why you went into cardiac surgery specifically? I wanted to be that person for other families, Ryan said. I wanted to have the skills to fix what was broken and give people hope when they had none left. That is a beautiful motivation, Sarah said softly. It was, Ryan agreed, but somewhere along the way, I lost sight of that original purpose. I became more interested in being recognized as the best surgeon than in being the most compassionate one. I started seeing patients as opportunities to demonstrate my technical skills rather than as people who needed healing. He looked directly at her, and Sarah felt her breath catch at the honesty in his green eyes. You reminded me why I became a doctor in the first place, he said. When you asked about Isabella's travel history, you were not trying to show off your medical knowledge. You were trying to save a little girl's life. That kind of pure motivation. I had forgotten what that felt like. Sarah felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. I think you are being too hard on yourself. The fact that you are willing to recognize your own limitations and ask for help shows that you never completely lost sight of your original purpose. Maybe, Ryan said, but I know that I am a better doctor when I work with you. Your perspective keeps me grounded in what really matters. The air in the office felt charged with unspoken emotion. Sarah was very aware that they were alone, that the conversation had moved far beyond professional collaboration into something much more personal. The way Ryan was looking at her, the softness in his voice when he talked about how she had changed his perspective, it felt like something was building between them, something that had nothing to do with medicine and everything to do with the connection they had discovered. Sarah, Ryan said quietly, and there was something different in his voice, something that made her pulse quicken. "Yes. I want you to know that working with you these past 2 weeks has been—" He paused, searching for words. "It has been the most intellectually stimulating and personally rewarding experience I have had in years. You challenge me to be better, both as a doctor and as a person." Sarah felt her heart hammering against her ribs. The way he was looking at her, the intensity in his voice, she had the sudden sense that they were approaching something that would change everything between them. "Ryan," she said softly, not sure what she was going to say next. Before she could continue, her pager went off with an urgent message from the cardiac care unit. The spell was broken, and both of them seemed to remember where they were and what their professional relationship was supposed to be. "I should go," Sarah said, standing up quickly and gathering her research papers. "Mrs. Patterson in room 307 has been having irregular heart rhythms all evening." "Of course," Ryan said, also standing. "Patient care comes first." But as Sarah headed toward the door, she could feel him watching her. And when she turned back for one last look, the expression in his green eyes made her stomach flutter with nervous anticipation. Something was definitely happening between them, something that went far beyond professional respect or intellectual collaboration. And despite her better judgment, despite all the reasons why getting involved with the chief of cardiac surgery was probably a terrible idea, Sarah found herself looking forward to their next late-night meeting with an excitement that had nothing to do with medical research. As she hurried toward the elevator, she could not shake the feeling that the careful professional boundaries they had established were beginning to blur in ways that would soon make their relationship impossible to define as simply collegial. And the most surprising thing of all was that she was not sure she wanted to stop it from happening. "You are glowing," Marcus announced the next morning as Sarah arrived for her shift. "Literally glowing. What has Ryan Gray been doing to you in those late-night research sessions?" Sarah felt heat flood her cheeks. "We are working on a legitimate research study about holistic patient care approaches." "Uh-huh," Marcus said with a knowing grin. "And I suppose all that research requires you to stay until 10 o'clock every night, coming home with that dreamy expression on your face." "It is not dreamy," Sarah protested, though she knew her voice lacked conviction. "Honey, you have been floating around here for 2 weeks like you are living in some kind of romantic fantasy," Marcus continued relentlessly. "And Ryan Gray has been asking everyone on the staff casual questions about your background, your interests, and your relationship status. If this is just professional collaboration, then I am the Queen of England." Sarah tried to focus on checking her patient assignments for the day, but she could not deny that Marcus was right about her mood. She had been in an unusually good mood for 2 weeks, looking forward to work in a way that had nothing to do with her patients and everything to do with her evening meetings with Ryan. "Even if there were something happening between us, which I'm not saying there is," Sarah said carefully, "it would be completely inappropriate. He is the chief of cardiac surgery, and I am a staff nurse. The power dynamic alone makes any kind of romantic relationship impossible." "Sarah," Marcus said, his tone becoming more serious, "I have worked at this hospital for 8 years, and I have never seen Ryan Gray treat anyone the way he treats you. He looks at you like you are the most fascinating person he has ever met, and you look at him like he hung the moon and stars." Before Sarah could respond, she heard Ryan's voice behind her. "Good morning, Nurse Roberts." She turned to find him approaching the nurse's station, looking impeccable as always, in his white coat and perfectly pressed dress shirt. But when their eyes met, Sarah felt that familiar flutter of awareness that had been growing stronger with each passing day. "Good morning, Dr. Gray," she replied, trying to keep her voice professional despite the way her heart rate increased whenever he looked at her. "I wanted to discuss the survey methodology we reviewed last night," Ryan said. Do you have a few minutes before your shift begins? Of course, Sarah said, very aware that Marcus was watching their interaction with fascination. They moved to a quiet corner of the nurses' station, ostensibly to discuss research protocols. But Sarah found herself distracted by Ryan's proximity and the way he seemed to focus his complete attention on her whenever they talked. I have been thinking about your suggestions for the patient interview questions, Ryan said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. Your approach to understanding the emotional components of patient experience is exactly what this research needs. Thank you, Sarah said, trying to concentrate on his words rather than the way his presence seemed to fill her awareness. There is something else I wanted to ask you, Ryan continued, and something in his tone made her look up at him more closely. What is that? The hospital is hosting a medical education conference next month, and I have been asked to present our preliminary research findings. I would like you to co-present with me. Sarah stared at him in shock. You want me to present at a medical conference? As the co-principal investigator on this study, Ryan said firmly, your insights are fundamental to this research, and the medical community needs to hear about the value of nursing perspectives in complex case management. Sarah felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of what he was offering. A presentation at a medical conference would be an incredible opportunity for professional advancement, something that could change the trajectory of her entire career. I would be honored, she said, her voice slightly unsteady with emotion. Excellent, Ryan said, his smile widening. We will need to spend some additional time preparing the presentation materials. Perhaps we could meet this evening to begin outlining our approach. That would be perfect, Sarah agreed. As Ryan walked away toward the elevator bank, Sarah realized that Marcus had been listening to their entire conversation with an expression of amazement. A medical conference presentation, Marcus said slowly. Do you have any idea how significant that is? Nurses do not co-present at medical conferences with department chiefs. Ever. It is about the research, Sarah said, though even she was beginning to wonder if Ryan's professional interest in her was motivated by something more personal. Sarah, Marcus said gently, I think you need to be honest with yourself about what is happening here. Ryan Gray is not just treating you as a valuable colleague. He is treating you as someone he wants to spend time with, someone whose opinions matter to him personally, not just professionally. Sarah spent the rest of her shift thinking about Marcus's words and trying to analyze her own feelings about her relationship with Ryan. There was no denying that she looked forward to their evening meetings with an anticipation that went far beyond professional collaboration. She found herself thinking about him throughout the day, wondering what he would think about various situations, imagining conversations they might have. And when he looked at her with those intense green eyes, when he listened to her ideas with such focused attention, when he smiled at something she said, Sarah had to admit that her feelings were no longer purely professional. The question was whether Ryan felt the same way, or whether she was reading romantic interest into what was simply respectful collaboration. That evening, as she made her way to Ryan's office for their meeting about the conference presentation, Sarah decided that she needed to be more aware of the signals between them. If there was genuine romantic potential developing, she needed to understand it clearly before making any decisions about how to proceed. Ryan was waiting for her with coffee and a selection of medical journals spread across his desk. But when she entered his office, he looked up at her with an expression that was definitely not purely professional. Thank you for staying late again, he said, his voice warmer than usual. I know you must be tired after a full shift. I am not tired, Sarah said, settling into the chair beside his desk that had become her usual spot. I enjoy our work together. So do I, Ryan said, and there was something in his voice that made her look at him more closely. They spent an hour outlining their presentation, discussing which cases to include and how to structure their findings. But Sarah found herself increasingly aware of the undercurrents in their conversation, the way Ryan seemed to find excuses to lean closer to her when reviewing documents, the way his eyes lingered on her face when she was talking. "Sarah," he said during a lull in their discussion, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Are you happy with your career trajectory? With nursing, I mean." Sarah considered the question carefully. "I love patient care," she said finally. "But I have always been interested in advancing my education. I have thought about applying for a nurse practitioner program." "You should," Ryan said immediately. "You have the intellectual capacity and the clinical instincts to excel in an advanced practice role." "The programs are expensive," Sarah said, "and competitive. I'm not sure I would be accepted." "You would be accepted anywhere you applied," Ryan said with conviction. "And as for the financial considerations," he paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "If you decided to pursue advanced education, I would be happy to help you explore funding options. Research grants, hospital sponsorship programs, that kind of thing." Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. The offer was generous beyond anything she could have expected, but it also felt intensely personal. "That is very kind of you," she said softly. "It is not kindness," Ryan replied, his green eyes intense. "It is an investment in your potential. You have too much talent to be limited by financial constraints." They looked at each other across his desk, and Sarah felt the air between them grow charged with unspoken emotion. The way Ryan was looking at her, the concern in his voice when he talked about her career, the personal investment he seemed to have in her future, it all felt like something much more than professional mentorship. "Ryan," she began, not sure what she wanted to say. "Yes. Why are you doing all this for me? The research partnership, the conference presentation, offering to help with graduate school. Why?" Ryan was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was softer than she had ever heard it. "Because you challenge me to be better than I am," he said. "Because working with you has reminded me what I love about medicine. Because—" He paused, seeming to struggle with his words. "Because I have never met anyone who combines intellectual brilliance with genuine compassion the way you do." Sarah felt her breath catch in her throat. The way he was looking at her, the vulnerability in his voice, it was clear that his feelings for her had moved far beyond professional respect. "Sarah," Ryan said quietly, "I need you to know that everything I have offered you, the research partnership, the conference presentation, the educational funding, all of that is based on your merit and your abilities. It has nothing to do with—" He paused, searching for words. "It has nothing to do with my personal feelings." "Your personal feelings," Sarah repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. Ryan stood up from behind his desk and moved to stand beside her chair, close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his green eyes. "I think you know that my interest in you has become more than professional," he said, his voice rough with honesty. "But I want you to be absolutely certain that my respect for your abilities and my desire to support your career are completely separate from the way I feel about you as a woman." Sarah's heart was racing so fast, she could barely think. Ryan was standing close enough to touch, looking down at her with an expression that left no doubt about his feelings. "How do you feel about me?" she asked. Surprised by her own boldness, Ryan reached out and gently touched her face, his thumb tracing along her cheekbone with infinite tenderness. "I think you are extraordinary," he said softly. "Brilliant and compassionate and brave. You saved Isabella's life because you had the courage to speak up when everyone else was intimidated into silence. You challenge my assumptions and make me want to be a better doctor and a better man." Sarah felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. No one had ever spoken to her with such genuine admiration and respect. "Ryan," she whispered, "I know this complicates everything," he continued, his hand still cradling her face. "I know that my position in the hospital creates ethical concerns about any kind of personal relationship, but I cannot pretend that I do not have feelings for you." Sarah reached up and covered his hand with hers, marveling at the warmth and strength of his fingers. "I have feelings for you too," she admitted, her voice barely audible. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, the weight of their mutual confession hanging in the air between them. Then Ryan leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to, and brushed his lips against hers in the softest, most tender kiss she had ever experienced. When they broke apart, Sarah felt as though the world had shifted on its axis. The careful professional boundaries they had maintained for weeks had dissolved in an instant, replaced by something much more complicated and infinitely more precious. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice unsteady. "I do not know," Ryan admitted, his forehead resting against hers, "but I know that I do not want to go back to pretending that I do not care about you." Sarah closed her eyes and tried to think rationally about the situation. A romantic relationship with the chief of cardiac surgery would create complications she could barely imagine. Hospital policies, professional gossip, questions about her career advancement, all of it would become infinitely more complex. But when she opened her eyes and saw the way Ryan was looking at her, with such tenderness and genuine affection, all of her rational concerns seemed much less important than the connection they had discovered. "Neither do I," she said softly. Ryan smiled and kissed her again, deeper this time, and Sarah felt herself melting into his embrace. Whatever complications lay ahead, whatever challenges they would have to navigate, she knew that what was happening between them was real and precious and worth fighting for. As they held each other in the quiet of his office, Sarah realized that her life had changed completely in the space of 3 weeks. She had gone from being an invisible nurse to being recognized as a valuable colleague, to being cared for by a man she was rapidly falling in love with. And despite all the uncertainty about what the future would hold, she had never been happier. Sarah arrived at work the next morning with the memory of Ryan's kiss still tingling on her lips. She had barely slept, replaying every moment of their conversation in his office, the tenderness in his voice when he told her she was extraordinary, the way his hand had felt against her face. But in the harsh fluorescent lighting of the cardiac care unit, with the familiar sounds of monitors beeping and nurses chatting at the station, the romantic intensity of the previous evening felt almost surreal. How was she supposed to maintain professional boundaries with the man she had kissed just 12 hours ago? "You look like you got run over by a truck," Marcus observed as Sarah checked her patient assignments. "Did you and Ryan work until midnight again on that research project?" Sarah felt heat flood her cheeks. "Something like that." "Uh-huh," Marcus said, studying her face with the analytical expression he reserved for particularly interesting gossip. "And I suppose those are exhaustion circles under your eyes, not the kind of sleeplessness that comes from a certain cardiac surgeon finally making his intentions clear?" Before Sarah could respond, she heard Ryan's voice across the unit. "Good morning, everyone." Sarah's heart immediately began racing as she turned to see him approaching the nurses' station. He looked impeccable as always, his white coat crisp and his dark hair perfectly styled. But when their eyes met, she saw something new in his expression, a warmth and awareness that had not been there before their conversation the previous night. "Dr. de Grey," she said, trying to keep her voice steady and professional. "Nurse Roberts," he replied. And there was something in the way he said her name that made her stomach flutter with awareness. "Could I speak with you about the Johnson case when you have a moment?" "Of course," Sarah said, very conscious that Marcus was watching their interaction with fascination. They moved to the small consultation room adjacent to the nurse's station. And as soon as Ryan closed the door behind them, the professional facade seemed to slip away. "How are you feeling about last night?" he asked quietly, his green eyes searching her face. "I have been thinking about it all morning," Sarah admitted, "about what it means for us professionally." Ryan stepped closer to her, close enough that she could smell his cologne and see the concern in his expression. "I have been thinking about that too," he said. "I want you to know that nothing has to change in terms of our work relationship. The research partnership, the conference presentation, your career advancement, all of that remains exactly the same regardless of what happens between us personally. But how do we maintain professional boundaries when we both know there is something more between us?" Sarah asked. Ryan reached out and gently touched her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers in a gesture that felt both intimate and reassuring. "We take it slowly," he said. "We continue working together as we have been, but we also acknowledge that our feelings for each other are real. We do not have to figure everything out immediately." Sarah felt some of the tension in her shoulders relax. "That sounds reasonable. There is something else I want to discuss with you," Ryan said, his thumb tracing gentle circles on the back of her hand. "The hospital administration has asked me to present our research findings at the American Heart Association conference in Boston next month. I would like you to co-present with me, but it would mean traveling together for 3 days. Sarah's pulse quickened at the implications. Traveling together. Separate hotel rooms, of course, Ryan said quickly, but we would be spending significant time together outside of the hospital environment. I want to make sure you are comfortable with that." Sarah looked down at their joined hands, marveling at how natural it felt to be touching him this way. 3 weeks ago, she would never have imagined holding hands with the arrogant surgeon who had dismissed her in that conference room. Now, the man standing before her seemed like someone completely different, vulnerable and caring and genuinely interested in her well-being. "I would love to present at the American Heart Association conference," she said, "and I trust you to maintain appropriate boundaries." "Thank you," Ryan said, his voice soft with relief, "for trusting me and for agreeing to continue our partnership despite the complications." A knock on the consultation room door interrupted their conversation, and they quickly stepped apart as Dr. Chen entered. "Ryan, Sarah," she said, glancing between them with an expression of mild curiosity, "I wanted to discuss the preliminary results from your patient advocacy study. The hospital board is very interested in your findings." "Of course," Ryan said, immediately shifting back into his professional demeanor. "Sarah, would you be available to meet with Dr. Chen this afternoon to review our data analysis?" "Absolutely," Sarah replied, also returning to her professional voice. As they left the consultation room and returned to their respective duties, Sarah could not help but notice the way Ryan's eyes lingered on her face, or the small smile that played at the corners of his mouth when he thought no one else was looking. Marcus was waiting for her at the nurse's station with an expression of barely contained excitement. "Okay, what just happened in that room?" he demanded in a whisper. "We discussed the Johnson case and our research presentation," Sarah said, trying to sound casual. "Sarah Elizabeth Roberts," Marcus said, using her full name in the tone he reserved for serious conversations. "You are glowing like a woman who just had a very important conversation with a man she cares about. And Ryan Gray looked at you like you are the most precious thing in this hospital." Sarah felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment, but she could not deny the happiness that was bubbling up inside her chest. Despite all the complications and potential challenges, She was falling for Ryan Gray in a way that felt both terrifying and wonderful. "Even if something were happening between us," she said carefully, "it would have to remain completely private. The hospital has policies about relationships between staff members at different levels." "Honey," Marcus said with a knowing smile, "I have been watching hospital romances for 8 years, and I can tell you that what is happening between you and Ryan Gray is not something that can be kept secret for very long. The way you two look at each other could power the entire cardiac wing." Sarah spent the rest of her morning shift trying to focus on her patients, but her thoughts kept drifting to Ryan and the way he had looked at her when he said they would take things slowly. There was something about his careful consideration of her feelings, his concern for her professional reputation, that made her trust him in a way she had never trusted anyone before. That afternoon, she met with Ryan and Dr. Chen to review their research data, and she was struck by how seamlessly they worked together as a team. Ryan consistently sought her input on analysis and interpretation, treating her as an equal partner in every aspect of the discussion. "Your nursing perspective has added tremendous depth to this research," Dr. Chen said as they concluded their meeting. "The medical community needs to hear about the value of interdisciplinary collaboration in complex case management." "Sarah's insights have been fundamental to our approach," Ryan said, his voice filled with genuine respect and admiration. "This research would not be nearly as comprehensive without her contributions." After Dr. Chen left, Ryan and Sarah remained in the conference room to finalize their presentation outline. "You did not have to give me so much credit in front of Dr. Chen," Sarah said, as they organized their research materials. "I gave you exactly the credit you deserve," Ryan replied firmly. "Your work on this project has been exceptional, and I want everyone to recognize that." "Thank you," Sarah said softly, "for treating me as an equal partner, for supporting my ideas, for everything." Ryan looked up from the papers he was organizing, his green eyes intense with emotion. "Sarah," he said quietly, "you have changed the way I think about medicine, about collaboration, about what it means to be a good doctor. I should be thanking you." They were sitting close together at the conference table, close enough that Sarah could see the sincerity in his expression, the way his gaze kept dropping to her lips as if he was remembering their kiss from the night before. "Ryan," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes? I keep thinking about last night, about what you said, about how you feel about me." Ryan reached across the small space between them and took her hand, his thumb tracing gentle patterns on her palm. "I meant every word," he said. "You are extraordinary, Sarah, brilliant and compassionate and brave. I have never met anyone like you." Sarah felt her heart skip a beat at the tenderness in his voice. "I have never felt about anyone the way I feel about you." They looked at each other across the conference table, and Sarah felt the air between them grow charged with unspoken longing. The way Ryan was looking at her, the gentle pressure of his fingers against hers, the vulnerability in his expression, it all made her want to forget about professional boundaries and hospital policies and simply follow her heart. "We should probably get back to work," Ryan said reluctantly, though he made no move to release her hand. "Probably," Sarah agreed, though she also made no effort to pull away from him. They sat there for another moment, simply holding hands and looking at each other, both of them clearly reluctant to break the intimate spell that had settled over them. Finally, Ryan lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a soft kiss to her palm, a gesture so tender and romantic that Sarah felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. "I will see you tomorrow," he said softly. "Tomorrow," Sarah repeated, already looking forward to it with an anticipation that had nothing to do with their research and everything to do with the man who was looking at her as if she were the most important person in his world. The next 3 weeks fell into a pattern that felt both natural and charged with romantic tension. Sarah and Ryan worked together on their research during the day, maintaining careful professional boundaries in front of their colleagues. But their evening meetings in his office became increasingly intimate, filled with long conversations about their personal histories, their dreams for the future, and the growing connection between them. "Tell me about your family," Ryan said one evening, as they reviewed survey responses from their patient interviews. They were sitting close together on the small sofa in his office, ostensibly because they needed to share the laptop screen, but Sarah suspected they were both finding excuses to be near each other. "My parents were high school sweethearts," Sarah said, curling her legs under her as she settled more comfortably beside him. "They got married right after graduation and had me when they were 22. My father worked at the Rockwell Collins factory for 26 years, and my mother taught 3rd grade for 30 years. "That sounds like a stable, loving home," Ryan said, and there was something wistful in his voice. "It was," Sarah confirmed. "They were completely devoted to each other and to me. When my father was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, my mother took early retirement to care for him. She held his hand when he died and told him it was okay to let go." Ryan was quiet for a moment, his fingers absently stroking her hand as he processed her words. "That kind of love is rare," he said finally. "What about your parents?" Sarah asked gently. Ryan's expression grew thoughtful. "They are good people, very focused on education and achievement. My father teaches high school physics, and my mother is a guidance counselor. They sacrificed a lot to support my medical school dreams." "Do they know about your success here?" Sarah asked. "They know about my career achievements," Ryan said carefully. "But I think they would be disappointed to know how arrogant I became. How I lost sight of the values they tried to teach me about treating people with respect, regardless of their position in life." Sarah turned to face him more fully, studying the vulnerability in his expression. "You are not that arrogant man anymore," she said softly. "The way you work with the nursing staff now, the way you listen to different perspectives, the way you treat me as an equal partner, that shows who you really are." "You changed me," Ryan said, his green eyes intense with emotion. "Working with you, seeing how you approach patient care with such genuine compassion, it reminded me why I wanted to become a doctor in the first place." "You changed yourself," Sarah corrected. "You had the humility to recognize your limitations and the courage to ask for help. That takes tremendous character." Ryan reached up and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch sending shivers of awareness through her entire body. "I have never talked to anyone the way I talk to you," he said quietly. "You make me want to be completely honest about my fears, my mistakes, my hopes for the future." "What are your hopes for the future?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ryan's eyes darkened with an emotion that made her pulse quicken. "I hope that I continue to grow as a doctor and as a person," he said slowly. "I hope that I can contribute something meaningful to medical research and patient care. And I hope," he paused, seeming to choose his words carefully, "I hope that I can build a life with someone who challenges me to be my best self, someone who shares my values and my commitment to making a difference." Sarah felt her breath catch in her throat. The way he was looking at her, the intimacy in his voice. It was clear that he was talking about building a future with her. "Ryan," she said softly. "I know it is too soon to be talking about the future," he said quickly. "I know we are still figuring out what this is between us, but I want you to know that my feelings for you are serious. This is not some casual attraction or temporary fascination." "My feelings are serious too," Sarah admitted, her heart racing at the magnitude of what they were discussing. "But there are so many complications. The hospital policies, the difference in our positions, the potential impact on both of our careers. I know, Ryan said, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her cheek. But I also know that what we have together is worth fighting for. You make me a better doctor and a better man, Sarah. I do not want to lose that because of hospital politics or professional concerns. Sarah leaned into his touch, marveling at how safe and cherished she felt when he looked at her this way. "What are you suggesting?" she asked. "I am suggesting that we continue as we have been," Ryan said, "working together professionally, getting to know each other personally, and seeing where this connection leads us. When we present at the conference in Boston next week, it will give us a chance to spend time together outside of the hospital environment. Maybe that will help us figure out what we want this relationship to become." Sarah nodded, feeling a mixture of excitement and nervousness about the upcoming trip. The thought of spending 3 days with Ryan in Boston, away from the constraints of their hospital roles, was both thrilling and terrifying. "I would like that," she said. Ryan smiled and leaned down to brush his lips against hers, in a kiss that was soft and sweet and filled with promise. When they broke apart, Sarah felt as though her entire world had shifted to center around this man who looked at her with such tenderness and respect. "Sarah," Ryan said against her lips. "Yes, I am falling in love with you." Sarah felt tears of happiness prick at the corners of her eyes. "I am falling in love with you too." They held each other on the small sofa in his office, surrounded by medical journals and research data, but feeling as though they were the only two people in the world. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever obstacles they would have to navigate, Sarah knew that what was happening between them was real and precious and worth whatever sacrifices they might have to make. As Ryan's arms tightened around her, Sarah realized that she had never felt as understood or as valued as she did in this moment. The man who had once dismissed her without a second thought now looked at her as if she were the most important person in his life, and despite all the uncertainty about their future, she had never been happier. The morning of their departure for Boston arrived grey and drizzly, typical October weather in Chicago. Sarah stood in her small apartment, staring at her suitcase and trying to calm the nervous energy that had been building for days. She had packed and repacked 3 times, uncertain what to wear for her first major medical conference presentation. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Ryan. "Car will be there in 10 minutes. Looking forward to this trip with you." Sarah felt her stomach flutter with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. 3 days in Boston with Ryan, presenting their research to hundreds of medical professionals, spending time together outside the familiar environment of the hospital. It felt like a turning point in their relationship. When the black car pulled up outside her building, Sarah was surprised to see Ryan in the passenger seat rather than sitting in the back, like the hospital executive he was. "Good morning," he said, as the driver loaded her suitcase into the trunk. "How are you feeling about the presentation?" "Nervous," Sarah admitted as they settled into the back seat together. "I have never presented to such a large audience of doctors before." "You are going to be brilliant," Ryan said with complete confidence. "Your insights about patient advocacy and holistic care are exactly what the medical community needs to hear." During the flight to Boston, they reviewed their presentation materials one final time, but Sarah found herself distracted by Ryan's proximity, sitting beside him on the plane, sharing the small workspace of their tray tables. She was intensely aware of every casual touch, every moment when their hands brushed as they reached for the same document. "Sarah," Ryan said quietly as the plane began its descent into Logan Airport, "I want you to know that regardless of how the presentation goes, I am proud to be your research partner. You have brought a perspective to this work that I never could have achieved alone. "Thank you," Sarah said, feeling a warm glow of satisfaction at his praise. "I am proud to be working with you too." The hotel Ryan had selected was elegant, but not ostentatious, located within walking distance of the conference center. As they checked in at the front desk, Sarah was very aware that they were maintaining separate rooms, despite the obvious chemistry between them. "Would you like to have dinner together tonight?" Ryan asked, as they waited for the elevator to take them to their respective floors. "There is an excellent restaurant near the harbor that I thought you might enjoy." "I would love that," Sarah said, trying not to think about how much the invitation felt like a real date rather than a professional dinner between colleagues. "Wonderful. Shall we meet in the lobby at 7? Sarah spent the afternoon reviewing their presentation slides and trying on 3 different outfits before settling on a navy blue dress that was professional but flattering. When she met Ryan in the hotel lobby at 7 o'clock, the appreciative look in his green eyes made her stomach flutter with awareness. "You look beautiful," he said softly, offering her his arm. "Thank you," Sarah replied, trying to ignore the way her pulse quickened at his compliment. The restaurant he had chosen was intimate and sophisticated, with candle-lit tables overlooking Boston Harbor. As they were seated at a corner table with a view of the water, Sarah could not help but notice how romantic the setting felt. "This is lovely," she said, looking out at the lights reflecting on the dark water. "I thought you would appreciate the atmosphere," Ryan said, his eyes warm as he studied her face in the candlelight. "You have been working so hard on this research. You deserve to enjoy the experience of presenting it." Over dinner, their conversation ranged from their upcoming presentation to their personal histories to their observations about the differences between Boston and Chicago medical communities. Sarah found herself relaxing into the easy intimacy they had developed during their weeks of working together. "Can I ask you something?" Sarah said as they shared dessert, a decadent chocolate mousse that Ryan had insisted they order. "Anything," Ryan replied. "Do you ever regret the years you spent being so focused on your individual achievements? Do you wish you had learned to collaborate sooner?" Ryan was quiet for a moment, considering her question seriously. "I regret the arrogance," he said finally. "I regret dismissing people whose perspectives could have made me a better doctor, but I do not regret the work ethic or the commitment to excellence. Those qualities are what enabled me to reach a position where I could support research like ours, where I could help advance your career." "You have definitely helped advance my career," Sarah said softly. "But more than that, you have made me feel valued in a way I never experienced before." Ryan reached across the table and took her hand, his thumb tracing gentle patterns on her palm. "You are valued," he said intensely, "by me, by the hospital administration, by every patient whose care you have improved. What we have accomplished together in just a few weeks, it is remarkable." Sarah felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. "I never imagined that my nursing insights could contribute to medical research in such a meaningful way." "Your insights are fundamental to this research," Ryan said firmly. "Tomorrow, when we present to the American Heart Association, you are going to show hundreds of doctors that nursing perspectives are essential to comprehensive patient care." They walked back to the hotel along the harbor, and Sarah found herself very aware of Ryan's presence beside her. The way he adjusted his pace to match hers, the protective way he guided her around puddles and uneven sidewalks, the casual intimacy of their conversation, it all felt natural and comfortable and romantic. "Thank you for dinner," Sarah said as they reached the hotel elevator bank, "and for bringing me to Boston for this conference. This opportunity means more to me than you know." "Thank you for agreeing to come," Ryan replied. "For trusting me with your career advancement, and for sharing this experience with me." They rode the elevator up to Sarah's floor in comfortable silence. But as they reached her door, the atmosphere between them shifted into something more charged. "Good night, Sarah," Ryan said softly, stepping closer to her. "Good night," she replied, very aware of his proximity and the way he was looking at her. For a moment, they simply stood there looking at each other, both clearly reluctant to end the evening. Then Ryan reached up and gently cupped her face in his hands. "You are going to be incredible tomorrow," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "We are going to be incredible," Sarah corrected. Ryan smiled and leaned down to kiss her, soft and sweet and filled with promise. When they broke apart, Sarah felt as though her entire body was humming with awareness. "Sweet dreams," Ryan murmured against her forehead. As Sarah let herself into her hotel room and prepared for bed, she could not stop thinking about the way Ryan had looked at her during dinner, the tenderness in his voice when he told her she was valued, the gentle passion of his goodnight kiss. Tomorrow they would present their research to one of the most prestigious medical conferences in the country. But tonight, all she could think about was how much she was falling in love with the man who had transformed from an arrogant surgeon into her most trusted partner and dearest friend. The American Heart Association Conference Center was buzzing with energy when Sarah and Ryan arrived the next morning. Hundreds of cardiologists, researchers, and medical professionals filled the lobby, their conversations creating a low hum of excitement about the day's presentations. "Are you ready for this?" Ryan asked as they made their way toward the presentation hall where they would speak in 2 hours. "I think so," Sarah said, though her stomach was fluttering with nervous energy. "I have never presented to an audience this large or this distinguished." "Remember what we discussed," Ryan said, his voice calm and reassuring. "You belong in that room. Your insights about patient advocacy and holistic care are exactly what these doctors need to hear." They spent an hour in a quiet conference room, reviewing their slides one final time and practicing the transitions between their portions of the presentation. Sarah was struck by how seamlessly they worked together, finishing each other's thoughts and building on each other's ideas in a way that felt completely natural. "Dr. Gray, Nurse Roberts," a young woman with a conference badge approached them. "You are scheduled to present in Hall A in 15 minutes. They are ready for your audio and visual check." As they made their way to the presentation hall, Sarah felt her nervousness increase exponentially. Through the open doors, she could see an auditorium filled with at least 300 medical professionals, all of them accomplished doctors and researchers. "Sarah," Ryan said quietly, touching her arm, "look at me." She turned to face him, trying to calm her racing heart. "You have something important to say," he said, his green eyes intense with conviction. "These doctors need to hear your perspective on patient care. Your voice matters." "What if they do not take me seriously?" Sarah asked. "What if they see me as just a nurse trying to overstep my role?" "Then they will be making the same mistake I made 6 weeks ago," Ryan said firmly, "and they will miss out on insights that could make them better doctors." The audio technician called them forward to test their microphones, and Sarah took a deep breath as she stepped onto the stage. The auditorium looked even larger from this perspective, filled with faces she did not recognize, all of them waiting to hear what she had to say. "Ladies and gentlemen," the conference moderator announced, "please welcome Dr. Ryan Gray, Chief of Cardiac Surgery at Metropolitan General Hospital in Chicago, and Sarah Roberts, Registered Nurse and Co-Principal Investigator, presenting their research on interdisciplinary approaches to complex cardiac case management." Sarah felt a surge of pride at being introduced as co-principal investigator. 6 weeks ago, she had been an invisible nurse delivering coffee to medical conferences. Today, She was presenting original research to the American Heart Association. Ryan began their presentation with an overview of traditional cardiac case management approaches, explaining how medical teams typically functioned within hierarchical structures that limited input from nursing staff. His delivery was confident and polished, and Sarah could see why he was considered one of the most respected speakers in cardiac surgery. Then it was her turn. 6 weeks ago, Sarah began, her voice clear and strong despite her nervousness. An 8-year-old girl was dying in our hospital, and 30 specialists could not determine the cause of her illness. They had run every sophisticated test, consulted every expert, explored every rare diagnosis, but they had missed something fundamental. They had forgotten to ask about her vacation to Costa Rica. The auditorium was completely silent. Every person focused on her words. "I am a registered nurse with 5 years of experience in cardiac care," Sarah continued, feeling her confidence grow as she found her rhythm. "I am not a doctor. I do not have advanced degrees in medicine, and I was not invited to participate in the medical conferences about this patient's case. But I saved her life by asking a simple question. Did anyone check her travel history for exposure to endemic parasites?" Sarah could see doctors throughout the audience leaning forward, clearly engaged by her narrative. "This experience taught our team something crucial about medical care," she said. "Nurses spend more time with patients than any other medical professionals. We hear their stories, we observe their behaviors, we understand their family dynamics and personal histories. This perspective is not supplementary to medical diagnosis, it is essential to comprehensive patient care." For the next 20 minutes, Sarah and Ryan presented their research findings, demonstrating how systematic inclusion of nursing perspectives in complex case management had improved diagnostic accuracy by 37% and patient satisfaction by 48%. The medical community has traditionally viewed nursing input as supportive rather than diagnostic, Sarah concluded. Our research demonstrates that this perspective limits our ability to provide optimal patient care. When we truly listen to nursing observations and insights, we become better doctors, better diagnosticians, and better healers. The applause that followed their presentation was enthusiastic and sustained. As they left the stage, Sarah felt a rush of exhilaration unlike anything she had ever experienced. "You were incredible," Ryan said, as soon as they were out of sight of the audience. "Absolutely incredible. The way you commanded that room, the way you made them understand the value of nursing perspectives, it was masterful." "We were incredible," Sarah corrected, though she was glowing with pride and satisfaction. "No," Ryan said firmly, taking her hands in his. "This moment belongs to you. You just proved to 300 cardiologists that nursing insight is fundamental to excellent medical care. You changed minds today, Sarah. You made a difference." Before Sarah could respond, they were surrounded by conference attendees who wanted to discuss their research further. Doctor after doctor approached them with questions about implementing similar interdisciplinary approaches at their own hospitals. "Nurse Roberts," said Dr. Elizabeth Morgan from Harvard Medical School, "your presentation was remarkable. Have you considered pursuing advanced education in nursing? With your insights and communication skills, you would be an excellent candidate for a doctoral program." "I have thought about nurse practitioner school," Sarah admitted. "You should seriously consider a PhD in nursing science," Dr. Morgan continued. "Your research perspective could contribute significantly to academic medicine." As the conversations continued throughout the afternoon, Sarah began to realize that her career possibilities had expanded exponentially. The presentation had not only validated her current contributions, but had opened doors she had never imagined might be available to her. That evening, Ryan insisted on taking her to Boston's most exclusive restaurant to celebrate their success. "I cannot believe how many people approached us after the presentation," Sarah said, as they were seated at an elegant table overlooking the public garden. "Dr. Patterson from Johns Hopkins invited me to collaborate on a multi-hospital study. Dr. Chen from Stanford offered to write recommendation letters for graduate programs. You have impressed some of the most influential people in cardiac medicine," Ryan said, his eyes shining with pride and affection. "Your career trajectory just changed completely." "Our career trajectory," Sarah corrected. "This research partnership has been transformative for both of us." Ryan reached across the table and took her hand, his expression growing serious. "Sarah," he said quietly, "I need you to understand something. Everything that happened today, all the recognition you received, all the opportunities that are opening up for you, you earned all of that through your own abilities and insights. My role in this research was important, but your perspective was essential." "I know," Sarah said softly, "but I also know that I would never have had these opportunities without your willingness to listen to me, to treat me as an equal partner, to support my professional development. And I would never have produced research this meaningful without your insights," Ryan replied. "We make each other better, Sarah. Professionally and personally." Over dinner, they talked about the potential next steps in their research, the graduate school opportunities that had emerged from the conference, and the ways their partnership might continue to evolve. But underneath the professional discussions, Sarah was intensely aware of the romantic undercurrents in their conversation. "Sarah," Ryan said as they shared dessert, "there is something I want to tell you." "What is that?" she asked, noting the serious tone in his voice. "Today, watching you present to that audience, seeing the way you commanded their respect and attention, witnessing the impact of your insights on established medical professionals." Ryan paused, seeming to search for the right words. "I have never been more proud to be associated with anyone in my entire life." Sarah felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. "Ryan, I am not just proud to be your research partner," he continued, his voice soft with emotion. "I am proud to be falling in love with you. You are remarkable, Sarah, brilliant and brave and compassionate. You challenge me to be better every single day." "You challenge me too," Sarah said, her voice unsteady with emotion. "You saw potential in me that I did not even know existed. You believed in my abilities when I was not sure I believed in them myself." They walked back to the hotel hand in hand, both of them glowing with the success of the day and the deepening connection between them. When they reached Sarah's floor, Ryan walked her to her door as he had the night before. "Thank you," Sarah said, turning to face him. "For this opportunity, for believing in me, for everything." "Thank you," Ryan replied, "for changing my entire perspective on medicine and on life." He cupped her face in his hands and kissed her with a tenderness and passion that made Sarah feel as though her entire world had shifted to center around this moment. When they broke apart, both of them were breathing unsteadily. "Sarah," Ryan said against her forehead, "I love you. I love you too," she whispered. They held each other in the hotel corridor, and Sarah realized that she had found something she had not even known she was looking for: professional recognition, intellectual partnership, and a love that felt both passionate and enduring. All with the man who had transformed from her biggest critic to her greatest champion. As they reluctantly parted for the night, Sarah knew that their relationship had reached a turning point. Tomorrow, they would return to Chicago and the reality of hospital policies and professional boundaries. But tonight, in Boston, they had acknowledged that what was happening between them was real and precious and worth whatever challenges lay ahead. The flight back to Chicago was delayed by 3 hours due to weather, giving Sarah and Ryan an unexpected afternoon together in Boston. They decided to explore the city, walking through the public garden and along the Freedom Trail, talking about everything except the reality they would face when they returned to Metropolitan General Hospital. "I cannot remember the last time I took a day off to just wander around a city," Ryan said, as they sat on a bench overlooking the Charles River. "Medical training and then building a career, it does not leave much time for simple pleasures." "What do you do for fun?" Sarah asked, realizing that despite all their conversations, she knew very little about Ryan's life outside the hospital. "Honestly," Ryan said with a rueful smile, "I work, I read medical journals, I attend conferences. I've not had what most people would consider a social life in years." "That sounds lonely," Sarah said gently. "It was," Ryan admitted, "but I told myself that success required sacrifice, that building a reputation in cardiac surgery meant giving up personal relationships and leisure time." "Do you still believe that?" Sarah asked. Ryan turned to look at her, his green eyes serious and thoughtful. "No," he said quietly. "Working with you has shown me that the best medical care comes from collaboration and connection, not from isolated brilliance. And knowing you has shown me that personal relationships do not detract from professional success, they enhance it." They spent the afternoon exploring Boston's historic neighborhoods, and Sarah was struck by how natural it felt to be with Ryan outside the context of the hospital. He was funny and curious and attentive, pointing out architectural details and historical landmarks with the same intellectual enthusiasm he brought to their medical discussions. "There is something I have been wanting to ask you," Sarah said as they waited in the airport for their delayed flight. "What is that?" "When we get back to Chicago, how do we handle this?" She gestured between them. "Our relationship. I mean, the hospital has policies about relationships between staff members at different levels." Ryan was quiet for a moment, clearly having given the matter serious thought. "We will need to be discreet," he said carefully. "At least until we can determine the best way to navigate the administrative requirements. There are disclosure policies, but they are designed more for direct supervisory relationships than for research partnerships." "Are you comfortable with keeping our relationship private for now?" Sarah asked. "I am comfortable with whatever makes you feel secure about your career," Ryan replied. "Your professional reputation and advancement opportunities are more important than my desire to show the world how proud I am to be with you." Sarah felt her heart skip a beat at his words. "You are proud to be with me." "Incredibly proud," Ryan said firmly. "You are brilliant and accomplished and beautiful. Any man would be lucky to have your attention." "I want to be discreet too," Sarah said. "Not because I am ashamed of what is happening between us, but because I want our colleagues to respect our professional partnership without questioning whether it is based on personal feelings." "That makes perfect sense," Ryan agreed. "We have worked too hard to establish credibility for our research to have it undermined by hospital gossip." Their flight finally boarded at 9 o'clock that evening, and during the 2-hour journey back to Chicago, they made plans for continuing their research and managing their relationship within the constraints of hospital policies. "I have been thinking about graduate school," Sarah said as the plane began its descent into O'Hare Airport. Dr. Morgan's suggestion about a PhD in nursing science was intriguing. "You should absolutely pursue advanced education," Ryan said enthusiastically. "Your research perspective and communication skills would be tremendous assets in academic nursing." "Would you be willing to write a recommendation letter?" Sarah asked. "I would be honored to," Ryan replied. "But more than that, I would like to continue our research collaboration throughout your graduate studies. Some of the most meaningful medical research comes from long-term partnerships between clinicians and academics." As they collected their luggage and prepared to return to their separate lives in Chicago, Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and uncertainty about what lay ahead. The success of their Boston presentation had opened doors she had never imagined, but it had also complicated their relationship in ways they were still learning to navigate. "Sarah," Ryan said, as they waited for the taxi that would take her home, "I want you to know that whatever happens with our personal relationship, I am committed to supporting your professional development. The research opportunities, the graduate school recommendations, the conference presentations, all of that is separate from my personal feelings for you." "I know," Sarah said softly. "And I want you to know that my feelings for you are separate from my gratitude for your professional support. I care about you as a person, not just as a mentor or research partner." Ryan smiled and gently squeezed her hand. "I care about you too, more than I have ever cared about anyone." As Sarah's taxi pulled away from the airport, she looked back to see Ryan standing on the sidewalk, watching her leave. The 3 days in Boston had been professionally transformative and personally revelatory, but now they had to figure out how to maintain their connection within the reality of their hospital environment. Despite the challenges ahead, Sarah felt more optimistic about her future than she ever had before. She had found professional recognition, intellectual partnership, and a love that felt both passionate and enduring. Whatever obstacles they might face, she was ready to fight for what they had built together. Sarah's first day back at Metropolitan General Hospital felt surreal after the intensity of the Boston conference. She arrived early for her shift, hoping to process the events of the past few days before facing the inevitable questions from her colleagues about the presentation. "There she is," Marcus announced as soon as Sarah appeared at the nurse's station. "Our celebrity researcher who just presented to the American Heart Association." "It was a team presentation," Sarah said, trying to downplay the significance while she organized her patient assignments for the day. "Uh-huh," Marcus said with a knowing grin, "and I suppose it was just coincidence that Dr. Patricia Chen received 3 phone calls yesterday from conference attendees praising your specific contributions to cardiac care research." Before Sarah could respond, she heard Ryan's voice across the unit. "Good morning, everyone." Sarah's heart immediately began racing, but when she turned to greet him, both of them maintained perfectly professional expressions and tone. "Dr. Gray," she said, with the same respectful distance she had always used before their relationship changed. "Nurse Roberts," he replied, though Sarah thought she detected warmth in his green eyes that had not been there before Boston. "I wanted to follow up on some of the feedback we received from conference attendees. Do you have time to meet this afternoon to discuss potential next steps in our research?" "Of course," Sarah said, very conscious that several of her colleagues were listening to their interaction. "Excellent. Conference room B at 3 o'clock. "I will be there," Sarah confirmed. As Ryan walked away toward the elevator bank, Marcus raised an eyebrow at Sarah. "That was remarkably professional," he observed. "Almost too professional, if you ask me." "What do you mean?" Sarah asked, though she could feel heat rising in her cheeks. "I mean that 2 people who just spent 3 days together in Boston presenting groundbreaking research should probably seem a little more excited about following up on their success," Marcus said, with his usual perceptive analysis. "You both looked like you were trying very hard to maintain appropriate distance." Sarah tried to focus on her morning patient rounds, but she found her thoughts constantly drifting to her upcoming meeting with Ryan. She was nervous about transitioning back to their professional dynamic after the intimacy they had shared in Boston, but she was also looking forward to seeing him again. At 3 o'clock, she made her way to conference room B. carrying a legal pad and trying to calm the nervous energy that always seemed to accompany her interactions with Ryan now. He was already there when she arrived. 3 new research proposals spread across the conference table and a cup of coffee waiting for her at what had become her usual seat. "Thank you," she said, settling beside him and trying not to think about how different this felt from their dinner conversations in Boston. "I have heard from 4 different hospitals that want to implement variations of our interdisciplinary case management approach," Ryan said, his voice carefully professional. "Johns Hopkins, Stanford, Mayo Clinic and Cleveland Clinic have all requested consultation on developing similar programs." "That is incredible," Sarah said, genuinely excited by the implications. "Our research is actually influencing medical practice." "Your research is influencing medical practice," Ryan corrected. "The nursing perspective you brought to this work is what made it revolutionary rather than merely incremental." They spent an hour reviewing the consultation requests and discussing how they might structure their next phase of research. But Sarah was intensely aware of the careful distance Ryan was maintaining, the way he avoided unnecessary physical contact, the professional tone he used even when no one else was around to hear them. "Ryan," she said during a lull in their discussion, "are we okay? You seem different since we got back from Boston." Ryan looked up from the research proposal he had been reviewing, his green eyes meeting hers directly for the first time since their meeting had begun. "I'm trying to respect the boundaries we discussed," he said quietly. "I do not want our colleagues to question the legitimacy of our professional partnership because of personal feelings." "I appreciate that," Sarah said, "but you do not have to treat me like a stranger when we are alone." Ryan's expression softened slightly. "You're right. I think I am overcompensating because I am nervous about maintaining the balance between our personal and professional relationships." "We will figure it out," Sarah said gently. "We do not have to have all the answers immediately." "There is something else I wanted to discuss with you," Ryan said, his tone becoming more serious. "Dr. Chen called me this morning. The hospital administration wants to expand our research into a full-scale quality improvement initiative. They are offering funding for a dedicated position, a nurse researcher role that would be specifically designed around your expertise." Sarah stared at him in shock. "A dedicated research position, full-time, with a significant salary increase and funding for graduate school tuition," Ryan continued. "You would be the first nurse researcher at Metropolitan General, with the mandate to develop interdisciplinary approaches to complex case management." "I cannot believe this," Sarah said, her voice unsteady with emotion. 6 weeks ago, I was delivering coffee to medical conferences. Now they want to create a research position specifically for me. You have proven that nursing perspectives are essential to excellent medical care," Ryan said firmly. "This position would allow you to continue that work on a much larger scale." Sarah felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. The opportunity was beyond anything she had ever imagined might be possible for her career. "What would this mean for our research partnership?" she asked. "It would formalize our collaboration," Ryan said. "You would report directly to Dr. Chen rather than through the nursing administration, which would put you on equal footing with the medical staff. We would continue working together, but as professional equals rather than in a hierarchical relationship. That would eliminate some of the concerns about our personal relationship," Sarah realized. "Exactly," Ryan said, and for the first time since their return from Boston, she saw genuine warmth in his expression. "If you were a nurse researcher rather than a staff nurse, there would be no supervisory issues or power dynamic concerns." Sarah felt a surge of excitement about the professional possibilities, but also a flutter of nervousness about the magnitude of the change. "When do they need an answer?" she asked. "Take all the time you need," Ryan said. But I hope you will seriously consider it. You have the opportunity to shape medical practice in ways that could benefit thousands of patients." After their meeting concluded, Sarah walked back toward the cardiac care unit feeling overwhelmed by the rapid changes in her life. 6 weeks ago, her biggest concern had been whether Ryan Gray would acknowledge her existence. Now she was contemplating a career change that would make her one of the first nurse researchers at a major academic medical center. "How did the meeting go?" Marcus asked as soon as she appeared at the nurse's station. "They offered me a full-time research position," Sarah said, still trying to process the magnitude of the opportunity. Marcus's eyes widened. "Are you serious?" "Nurse researcher, reporting directly to Dr. Chen, with funding for graduate school," Sarah confirmed. "That is incredible," Marcus said, grabbing her in an enthusiastic hug. "You are going to be famous. The first nurse researcher at Metropolitan General." As word of Sarah's job offer spread through the nursing staff, she found herself surrounded by congratulatory colleagues and excited questions about her new role. But throughout the celebration, she found herself thinking about Ryan and wondering how this career change might affect their relationship. That evening, as she was preparing to leave the hospital, she received a text message from Ryan. "Dinner tonight to celebrate your job offer. I know a quiet place where we can talk without hospital interruptions." Sarah smiled as she typed her response. "I would love that." As she drove home to change clothes for dinner, Sarah realized that despite all the uncertainty about their future, she had never felt more optimistic about the path ahead. She was about to embark on a career that would allow her to make a real difference in medical practice, and she was falling in love with a man who supported her dreams and challenged her to reach her potential. Whatever obstacles lay ahead, she was ready to face them with the confidence that came from knowing she had found both professional fulfillment and personal happiness. Sarah spent 3 sleepless nights thinking about the research position offer. The opportunity was everything she could have dreamed of professionally. The chance to shape medical practice, to advocate for nursing perspectives on a national level, to pursue graduate education while building a meaningful career. But accepting the position would also formalize her partnership with Ryan in ways that would make their personal relationship impossible to hide. She was reviewing the formal job description for the 5th time when her phone rang. Ryan's name appeared on the screen, and despite everything that had happened between them, her heart still skipped a beat when she saw his number. "Hello," she answered, trying to sound casual despite the emotional turmoil she had been experiencing. "Sarah," Ryan's voice was warm but concerned. "But I know you are still considering the research position, but I wanted to make sure you understand something important." "What is that?" "This offer has nothing to do with our personal relationship," Ryan said firmly. "Dr. Chen and the hospital administration are creating this position because your research contributions have proven invaluable to patient care. Even if things between us personally were different, you would still deserve this opportunity." Sarah felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. Even when she was struggling with uncertainty, Ryan was thinking about her professional well-being first. "I know that," she said softly, "but I also know that accepting this position will change everything between us. We would be working together even more closely, and it would be much harder to keep our personal relationship private." "Are you worried about that?" Ryan asked gently. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, trying to articulate the complex emotions she had been wrestling with. "I'm worried about people thinking I got this position because I'm involved with you," she said finally. "I am worried about losing the respect I have earned through my own abilities." "Sarah," Ryan said, his voice intense with conviction, "anyone who has worked with you knows that your insights and research contributions are entirely your own. The nursing staff respects you because you advocate for patients. The medical staff respects you because you improve outcomes. The hospital administration respects you because you have proven that interdisciplinary collaboration works. But there will always be people who question whether my success is legitimate, Sarah said. There will, Ryan agreed. But that says more about their limitations than about your abilities. You cannot control what other people think, but you can control whether you pursue the opportunities you have earned. Sarah felt some of the tension in her shoulders relax. You really think I deserve this position? I think you deserve this position and much more, Ryan said without hesitation. You have the opportunity to influence medical education and patient care in ways that could benefit thousands of people. That kind of impact is worth weathering some gossip and skepticism. There is something else I am worried about, Sarah admitted. What is that? I am worried about what happens to us if I take this job. We would be professional equals, which removes some of the ethical concerns about our relationship. But we would also be working together constantly, and I do not know if that would be good for a romantic relationship. Ryan was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice was thoughtful and honest. I think working together has brought out the best in both of us, he said. But you are right that being professional partners and romantic partners simultaneously creates complexities we would need to navigate carefully. How do you think we should handle it? Sarah asked. I think we should be honest about our relationship with the people who matter, Ryan said. Dr. Chen, the hospital administration, our closest colleagues. Not because we owe them explanations, but because transparency is better than secrecy when it comes to professional relationships. Sarah felt a flutter of nervousness at the thought of openly acknowledging their relationship to their colleagues. Are you ready for that kind of scrutiny? She asked. I am ready for whatever allows us to build a future together, Ryan said simply. Sarah, I love you. I respect you professionally. I admire you personally, and I want to support your career in whatever way makes you feel most confident and fulfilled. I love you too, Sarah said, feeling the truth of it settle into her bones. And I want to take the research position. Are you sure? I am sure, Sarah said, surprising herself with the conviction in her voice. This is the opportunity I have been working toward my entire career, even when I did not know it existed. I'm not going to let fear hold me back from pursuing it. I'm so proud of you, Ryan said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. You are going to revolutionize nursing research? We are going to revolutionize interdisciplinary medical care, Sarah corrected. This has always been a partnership. Speaking of partnerships, Ryan said, his tone becoming more serious, there is something I want to discuss with you. Something important. What is it? Sarah asked, noting the change in his voice. Not over the phone, Ryan said. Could you meet me tonight? There is something I want to show you. Sarah felt her stomach flutter with nervous anticipation. Where do you want to meet? The hospital rooftop garden at 8 o'clock after the evening shift change. I know it sounds unusual, but it is the one place in the hospital where we can have complete privacy. All right, Sarah agreed, though she was puzzled by the mysterious nature of his request. I will see you at 8. After hanging up the phone, Sarah called Dr. Chen to formally accept the research position. The conversation was professional and encouraging, with Dr. Chen expressing genuine excitement about the potential for Sarah's work to influence medical practice on a national level. You will be starting a new chapter in your career, Dr. Chen said as they concluded their discussion. But more than that, you will be helping to start a new chapter in how hospitals approach patient care. Sarah spent the rest of the afternoon completing her final shift as a staff nurse, saying goodbye to patients she had cared for and colleagues she had worked with for 5 years. There was something bittersweet about leaving the bedside nursing role that had shaped her understanding of patient care, but she was excited about the opportunity to influence nursing practice on a much larger scale. At 8 o'clock, she made her way to the hospital rooftop garden, a small green space that had been created for staff relaxation but was rarely used during the evening hours. The October air was crisp and cool, and the lights of Chicago stretched out below them in a glittering panorama. Ryan was waiting for her near the small fountain at the center of the garden, and when he turned to greet her, Sarah was struck by something different in his expression. He looked nervous and excited and determined all at once. "Thank you for meeting me here," he said, taking her hands in his. "I wanted to talk to you somewhere that felt separate from our professional roles, somewhere that belonged just to us." "This is beautiful," Sarah said, looking around at the garden, lit by soft pathway lighting. "I had no idea this space existed." "I discovered it during my residency," Ryan said, "when I was having doubts about whether I was strong enough to handle the pressure of surgical training. I used to come here to think and to remind myself why I wanted to become a doctor." "Why are we here tonight?" Sarah asked gently. Ryan took a deep breath, and Sarah realized that his hands were trembling slightly as he held hers. "Because I want to ask you something that will change both of our lives," he said, his voice soft but steady. "And I wanted to ask you in a place that represents new beginnings and the courage to pursue your dreams." Sarah felt her heart begin to race as Ryan released her hands and reached into his jacket pocket. "Sarah Elizabeth Roberts," he said, dropping to one knee and pulling out a small velvet box. "You have transformed my understanding of medicine, of partnership, and of love. You have made me a better doctor and a better man. You have shown me that the greatest achievements come not from individual brilliance, but from connecting with others and building something meaningful together." Sarah felt tears streaming down her cheeks as Ryan opened the box to reveal a stunning engagement ring, a classic solitaire diamond set in platinum, elegant and timeless and perfect. "Will you marry me?" Ryan asked, his green eyes shining with love and hope and vulnerability. "Will you be my partner in life and in medicine? Will you help me continue growing into the man I want to be?" "Yes," Sarah whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "Yes, of course, yes." Ryan slipped the ring onto her finger with hands that were shaking with emotion, then stood and gathered her into his arms, spinning her around as they both laughed and cried with joy. "I love you," he said against her hair. "I love your brilliant mind and your compassionate heart and your courage to speak up for what matters." "I love you too," Sarah said, pulling back to look at him. "I love how you have grown and changed, how you listen to different perspectives, how you make me feel valued and cherished." They held each other in the rooftop garden, surrounded by the lights of the city and the promise of their future together. Sarah marveled at how much her life had changed in just 2 months, from an invisible nurse to a respected researcher to an engaged woman planning a future with the man she loved. "When did you start planning this?" she asked, admiring the ring on her finger. "I have been thinking about it since Boston," Ryan admitted. "Watching you present to the American Heart Association, seeing the impact of your research on medical practice, knowing that I wanted to spend the rest of my life supporting your dreams and building something meaningful together." "The ring is perfect," Sarah said, studying the elegant simplicity of the design. "I wanted something classic and enduring," Ryan said. "Something that would be as beautiful in 50 years as it is today." 50 years, Sarah repeated, marveling at the scope of the commitment they were making. "At least 50 years, Ryan said with a smile. "Maybe longer, if medical science continues to advance." They spent another hour on the rooftop, talking about their engagement, their upcoming wedding, and their shared vision for their future together. When they finally returned to the main hospital, Sarah felt as though she was floating with happiness and excitement. "When do you want to tell people?" Ryan asked as they waited for the elevator. "Soon," Sarah said. "I do not want to keep this secret for long. I want the world to know that I am going to marry the most wonderful man I have ever met." "I want to tell everyone too," Ryan said, squeezing her hand. "I am incredibly proud to be engaged to you." As they rode the elevator down to the parking garage, Sarah realized that her entire life had been transformed by one moment of courage 2 months ago when she chose to speak up in that conference room. That single decision to advocate for Isabella Rodriguez had led to professional recognition, meaningful research, and a love story that felt like something from a fairy tale. But unlike a fairy tale, this love was built on mutual respect, shared values, and genuine partnership. It was real and earned and sustainable, the kind of love that would grow stronger over decades of building a life together. As Ryan walked her to her car and kissed her goodnight, Sarah knew that she had found everything she had been searching for without even knowing she was looking for it. Professional fulfillment, intellectual partnership, and a love that would last a lifetime, all with the man who had started as her biggest critic and become her greatest champion. The next morning, Sarah arrived at the hospital 30 minutes early, too excited about her engagement to sleep any longer. The ring felt foreign on her finger, but every time she looked at it, she felt a surge of joy that made her want to share the news with everyone she met. Ryan was already at the nurse's station when she arrived, discussing a complex case with Dr. Chen. When he saw her approaching, his face lit up with a smile that made her stomach flutter with awareness and affection. "Good morning, Sarah," he said warmly, and she could hear the happiness in his voice, even though he was maintaining professional decorum. "Good morning, Dr. Gray," she replied, trying not to grin too widely at the secret they were sharing. "Doctor." Chen looked between them with a curious expression, clearly noticing something different in their interaction. "Sarah," she said, "I wanted to discuss the timeline for your transition to the research position. When would you like to begin your new role?" "I am ready to start as soon as possible," Sarah said. "I completed my final shift as a staff nurse yesterday, and I am excited to begin the research work." "Excellent," Dr. Chen said. "I have scheduled a meeting for this afternoon with the hospital administration to discuss the scope and goals for your position. Dr. Gray, I would like you to participate as well, since your research partnership will be central to Sarah's new role." "Of course," Ryan said. "I look forward to discussing our future collaboration." After Dr. Chen left, Ryan and Sarah found themselves alone at the nurse's station for the first time since their engagement. "How are you feeling this morning?" Ryan asked quietly, his eyes dropping to her left hand, where the engagement ring sparkled under the fluorescent lighting. "Happy," Sarah said simply. "Incredibly, ridiculously happy." "I am happy too," Ryan said, his voice soft with emotion. "I keep thinking about our conversation last night, about building a future together." Before Sarah could respond, Marcus appeared at her elbow with a coffee cup and his usual perceptive expression. "Good morning, lovebirds," he said cheerfully, "and congratulations on the engagement." Sarah's eyes widened in shock. "How did you—" "Honey, you are practically glowing with happiness. You keep touching your left hand. And Ryan Gray has been smiling like he won the lottery since he arrived this morning," Marcus said with a knowing grin. "Plus, that is a gorgeous engagement ring." Sarah looked down at her hand, realizing that she had been unconsciously turning the ring on her finger. "We were planning to tell people today," she said, glancing at Ryan for confirmation. "We did not want to keep it secret," Ryan added. We just wanted to decide on the best way to share the news with our colleagues. Well, you can start with me being absolutely thrilled for both of you, Marcus said, pulling Sarah into an enthusiastic hug. You two are perfect together, and anyone who has watched you work knows that this engagement is based on genuine partnership and mutual respect. Thank you, Sarah said, feeling tears of happiness prick at the corners of her eyes. That means so much to me. When is the wedding? Marcus asked excitedly. We have not discussed details yet, Ryan said. We got engaged last night. Last night? Marcus exclaimed. And you are both here working today instead of taking a romantic long weekend to celebrate? We wanted to maintain our professional commitments, Sarah said, and we are excited about our research work. You two are adorable, Marcus said with an affectionate smile. Completely adorable and perfect for each other. Over the course of the morning, word of Sarah and Ryan's engagement spread through the hospital with the efficiency that only medical facility gossip could achieve. By lunchtime, Sarah had received congratulations from dozens of colleagues, all of whom seemed genuinely happy about the news. I have to admit, I'm surprised by how positive everyone's reactions have been, Sarah said to Ryan as they ate lunch together in the hospital cafeteria. I was worried about people questioning the appropriateness of our relationship. Most people have watched us work together for the past 2 months, Ryan said. They have seen that our professional partnership is based on mutual respect and shared commitment to excellent patient care. Our personal relationship is just a natural extension of that compatibility. Dr. Patterson from cardiology said something interesting to me this morning, Sarah said. She said that our engagement demonstrates the value of interdisciplinary collaboration because we have learned to appreciate each other's expertise and perspectives. That is a lovely way to think about it, Ryan said. We fell in love because we respect each other's minds and values, not despite our professional differences. That afternoon, their meeting with the hospital administration went better than Sarah could have imagined. The executives were enthusiastic about expanding the research program and creating a model for nursing-led quality improvement initiatives that could be replicated at other hospitals. Your interdisciplinary approach has already generated interest from medical centers across the country, said Dr. William Harrison, the Chief Medical Officer. We believe that Sarah's new position could position Metropolitan General as a leader in collaborative patient care. We are excited about the potential to influence medical practice on a national level, Ryan said. Sarah's research perspective is exactly what the healthcare industry needs to improve patient outcomes. Speaking of your partnership, Dr. Harrison said with a slight smile, I understand that congratulations are in order. The hospital administration is very pleased that 2 of our most talented professionals have found personal happiness together. Thank you, Sarah said, feeling a warm glow of satisfaction at the official recognition of their relationship. We are committed to maintaining the highest standards of professionalism while building our life together. We have no concerns about your ability to balance your personal and professional relationships, Dr. Chen added. Your research collaboration has been exemplary, and your engagement only reinforces our confidence in your partnership. After the meeting concluded, Sarah and Ryan walked back toward the cardiac care unit, feeling optimistic about both their professional future and their personal happiness. I cannot believe how smoothly everything is going, Sarah said as they entered the elevator. The research position, our engagement, the support from our colleagues, it feels almost too good to be true. You deserve all of this, Ryan said firmly. You have worked hard, you have proven your abilities, and you have earned the respect and opportunities that are coming your way. We deserve this, Sarah corrected. Our partnership has made both of us better at everything we do. As the elevator doors opened on the cardiac care unit, Sarah saw Isabella Rodriguez and her father Eduardo waiting near the nurses' station. The 8-year-old girl looked completely healthy, her dark hair shining and her eyes bright with energy. "Nurse Sarah," Isabella called out when she saw them approaching. "Daddy brought me to visit you." Sarah knelt down to Isabella's level, marveling at the transformation from the critically ill child she had been 2 months ago. "You look wonderful, Isabella," Sarah said with genuine happiness. "How are you feeling?" "I feel great," Isabella said enthusiastically. "The doctors say I am completely healthy now. Daddy says you are the one who figured out what was making me sick. The medical team worked together to help you get better," Sarah said gently. "Dr. Gray and all the other doctors did the hard work of making you well." "But Daddy says you asked the important question," Isabella insisted. "The question about our trip to Costa Rica." Sarah glanced up at Eduardo Rodriguez, who was watching their interaction with a warm smile. "Nurse Roberts," Eduardo said, "I wanted to thank you again for saving my daughter's life, and I wanted to congratulate you on your engagement to Dr. Gray. Isabella and I are both very happy for you." "Thank you," Sarah said, standing up and accepting Eduardo's handshake. "That is very kind of you." "Dr. Gray," Eduardo continued, turning to Ryan, "you are a very lucky man. Nurse Roberts is an extraordinary woman." "I know," Ryan said, his voice filled with pride and affection. "I am incredibly fortunate." "Are you going to have a big wedding?" Isabella asked with the direct curiosity of an 8-year-old. Sarah and Ryan looked at each other and smiled. "We have not planned the details yet," Sarah said, "but we hope you and your father will be able to celebrate with us." "We would be honored," Eduardo said sincerely. After Isabella and her father left, Sarah felt overwhelmed by the fullness of her happiness. 2 months ago, she had been an invisible nurse whose insights were dismissed by the medical establishment. Today, she was an engaged woman with a meaningful career and the love of a man who valued her mind as much as her heart. "Are you all right?" Ryan asked, noticing the tears in her eyes. "I am perfect," Sarah said, reaching for his hand. "Absolutely perfect." 3 weeks later, Sarah was settling into her new office on the 3rd floor of the hospital when Ryan appeared in her doorway carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing the expression that she had learned meant he had exciting news to share. "Good morning, Dr. Roberts," he said with a teasing smile. "I am not Dr. Roberts yet," Sarah laughed, accepting the coffee he offered. "I do not start my doctoral program until next semester. You will always be Dr. Roberts to me," Ryan said, settling into the chair across from her desk. "How does it feel to have your own office?" Sarah looked around the space that had been created specifically for her new role as nurse researcher. It was small but comfortable, with a window overlooking the hospital courtyard and enough bookshelf space for the nursing journals and research texts she was accumulating. "It feels surreal," she admitted. 6 months ago, I was delivering coffee to medical conferences. Now I have my own research office and a doctoral fellowship." "You have also completely changed the culture of this hospital," Ryan pointed out. "The nursing staff feels more valued, the medical staff is more collaborative, and patient outcomes have improved across every department." "We have changed the culture," Sarah corrected, as she always did when Ryan tried to give her sole credit for their shared accomplishments. "Speaking of our shared accomplishments," Ryan said, his tone becoming more serious, "I have something important to discuss with you." "What is it?" Sarah asked, noting the excitement in his voice. "I received a call this morning from Dr. Elizabeth Morgan at Harvard Medical School," Ryan said. "She has been following our research, and she wants to offer us a joint appointment to establish an interdisciplinary patient care center at Massachusetts General Hospital." Sarah stared at him in shock. "Harvard Medical School wants to offer us a position." "Both of us," Ryan confirmed. You as the Director of Nursing Research and me as the Director of Cardiac Surgery. We would be building a program that could influence medical education and patient care on a national level. Sarah felt her heart racing with excitement and uncertainty. That would be an incredible opportunity. It would also mean moving to Boston, Ryan said carefully. Leaving Chicago, leaving Metropolitan General, starting over in a new city. What do you think about it? Sarah asked. Ryan reached across her desk and took her hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her engagement ring. I think we should make the decision together, he said. This is about our partnership, our shared vision for our careers, and our future as a married couple. Sarah felt a flutter of excitement at the mention of their upcoming marriage. They had set a date for the following spring, and the planning process had been a joy of shared decision-making and mutual compromise. What are the advantages of staying in Chicago? Sarah asked, trying to think through the decision systematically. We have established relationships here, we have proven our effectiveness, and we have the support of the hospital administration, Ryan said. We also have friends and a community that we care about. What are the advantages of moving to Boston? Sarah continued. Harvard Medical School is the most prestigious medical institution in the world, Ryan said. The opportunity to shape medical education and establish a new model for interdisciplinary care would be unprecedented. We could influence how future doctors and nurses are trained to work together. Sarah was quiet for several minutes, considering the magnitude of the decision they were facing. Can I ask you something? She said finally. Anything. If you had received this offer 6 months ago, before we started working together, what would you have done? Ryan smiled. 6 months ago, I would have accepted immediately without considering anyone else's opinion or needs. I would have seen it as validation of my individual achievements and an opportunity to advance my personal career. And now, Sarah asked, now I know that the best decisions are made together, Ryan said. I know that our partnership is more valuable than any individual opportunity. I know that I want to build a life and a career with you, wherever that might be. Sarah felt tears of happiness prick at the corners of her eyes. I feel the same way. Our collaboration has been the most meaningful work of my life. So, what do you think we should do? Ryan asked. Sarah looked around her office, thinking about the relationship she had built at Metropolitan General, the patients she had advocated for, the colleagues who had become friends. Then she thought about the opportunity to influence medical education on a national scale, to shape how future healthcare professionals would approach patient care. I think we should seriously consider the Harvard offer, she said slowly. But I also think we should make sure that any decision we make serves our shared vision for interdisciplinary patient care. What do you mean? Ryan asked. I mean that we should accept the position only if we can maintain our commitment to nursing perspectives and collaborative care, Sarah said. If Harvard wants us because of our individual credentials, that is one thing. But if they want us because of our partnership and our approach to interdisciplinary medicine, that is something worth pursuing. Ryan nodded thoughtfully. That is an excellent way to frame the decision. Should we schedule a trip to Boston to meet with Dr. Morgan and tour the facilities? I think we should, Sarah agreed. But first, I want to discuss it with Dr. Chen and the administration here. If we decide to leave Metropolitan General, I want to make sure our research program can continue without us. That is very thoughtful, Ryan said. You want to ensure that the changes we have implemented here will be sustainable. This hospital gave me the opportunity to develop as a researcher, Sarah said. I want to make sure that other nurses will have similar opportunities in the future. Ryan stood up and walked around her desk to where she was sitting, then leaned down to kiss her forehead tenderly. "This is why I love you," he said softly. "You always think about how your decisions will affect other people. You always consider the broader impact of your choices." "We think about the broader impact," Sarah corrected with a smile. "We do," Ryan agreed. "And that is why whatever we decide about Harvard, I know it will be the right choice for us." As Ryan left her office to return to his surgical schedule, Sarah sat quietly for several minutes, thinking about the unexpected turns her life had taken. 6 months ago, her biggest professional goal had been to earn the respect of her medical colleagues. Now she was considering whether to accept a position at Harvard Medical School. But more than the professional opportunities, she was grateful for the partnership she had found with Ryan. He had grown from an arrogant surgeon who dismissed her insights to a man who valued her perspective and included her in every important decision. Together, they had built something meaningful, a research collaboration that was improving patient care and a personal relationship that was built on mutual respect and shared values. Whatever they decided about Boston, Sarah knew that their future would be bright. They had learned to make decisions together, to support each other's dreams, and to create something larger than either of them could achieve alone. As she returned to her research work, Sarah felt a deep sense of contentment about the path her life had taken. She had found professional fulfillment, intellectual partnership, and a love that continued to grow stronger with each passing day. The trip to Boston to visit Harvard Medical School was scheduled for the second week of November, giving Sarah and Ryan time to carefully consider the opportunity and discuss their decision with their colleagues at Metropolitan General. Dr. Chen's reaction to the news was a mixture of pride and disappointment. "I am thrilled that Harvard recognizes the value of your work," she said during their meeting in her office. "But I am also devastated at the thought of losing 2 of our most talented professionals." "We have not made a decision yet," Sarah said. "We want to make sure that any choice we make is in the best interest of patient care and medical research." "What would it take for you to stay at Metropolitan General?" Dr. Chen asked directly. Ryan and Sarah exchanged a glance, having discussed this possibility extensively. "We would need the resources to expand our research program significantly," Ryan said. "The ability to influence medical education and training, not just patient care. We would also need a commitment from the hospital to continue promoting interdisciplinary collaboration, even if we were not here to lead it," Sarah added. "This cannot be dependent on our individual involvement." Dr. Chen nodded thoughtfully. "Let me discuss this with the administration. I think there might be opportunities to create something here that would be competitive with what Harvard is offering." Meanwhile, the reaction from their colleagues was overwhelmingly supportive, even though many of them were sad about the possibility of Sarah and Ryan leaving. "You have to do what is best for your careers and your future together," Marcus said when Sarah told him about the Harvard offer. "But I hope you know that you will be missed terribly if you decide to leave." "We are not leaving our friendships behind," Sarah assured him. "Whatever we decide about our careers, the relationships we have built here will always be important to us." The week before their trip to Boston, Sarah received an unexpected phone call from Dr. Elizabeth Morgan herself. "Sarah," Dr. Morgan said, "I wanted to speak with you directly about our offer. I realize that this decision affects both your professional and personal life, and I want to make sure you understand exactly what we are proposing." "I appreciate you taking the time to call," Sarah said. "I am very interested in learning more about the position. What we want to create at Massachusetts General is a completely new model for medical education and patient care," Dr. Morgan explained. "We believe that the future of medicine lies in genuine collaboration between doctors and nurses, not in traditional hierarchical structures." "That aligns perfectly with our research findings," Sarah said. "Exactly. We want you and Dr. Gray to design and implement a program that could be replicated at medical schools across the country. Your research has demonstrated that interdisciplinary collaboration improves patient outcomes, and we want to make that the standard of care rather than the exception. Sarah felt her excitement growing as Dr. Morgan described their vision for the program. "Would I be involved in training medical students?" Sarah asked. "You would be teaching medical students, nursing students, and residents about collaborative patient care." Dr. Morgan confirmed. "Your perspective on nursing insights and patient advocacy would be central to their education." "That sounds incredible," Sarah said honestly. "I also want you to know that this offer is based entirely on your professional qualifications and research contributions." Dr. Morgan continued. "Your work has been groundbreaking, and we believe you have the potential to influence medical practice on a national level." After the phone call, Sarah felt more excited about the Harvard opportunity than ever before. The chance to shape how future healthcare professionals were trained to work together was exactly the kind of impact she had always dreamed of having. That evening, she and Ryan had dinner at their favorite restaurant to discuss her conversation with Dr. Morgan. "It sounds like they really understand what we are trying to accomplish," Ryan said after Sarah recounted the phone call. "The emphasis on education and system change rather than just research is exactly what we have been working toward." "I keep thinking about all the medical students and nursing students we could influence," Sarah said excitedly. "If we could teach them to value interdisciplinary collaboration from the beginning of their training, imagine how different healthcare could be in 10 or 20 years. That kind of systemic change is what attracted me to medicine in the first place," Ryan said. "The opportunity to make a lasting difference in how people are cared for." "Are you leaning toward accepting the offer?" Sarah asked. Ryan reached across the table and took her hand, his expression serious and thoughtful. "I am leaning toward whatever decision allows us to have the greatest impact on patient care and medical education," he said. "If that is Harvard, then I am excited about moving to Boston. If that is staying at Metropolitan General and building something here, then I am equally excited about that possibility." "How do we decide?" Sarah asked. "I think we visit Boston. We listen to what Dr. Chen proposes for keeping us in Chicago, and then we make the decision that feels right for our shared vision of our future," Ryan said. "Together," Sarah said, squeezing his hand. "Always together," Ryan confirmed. The flight to Boston was filled with excited conversation about the possibilities ahead of them. Sarah found herself looking forward to the visit, not just as a professional opportunity, but as a chance to explore a city where she and Ryan might build their married life together. Harvard Medical School was even more impressive than Sarah had imagined. The historic buildings, the cutting-edge research facilities, and the sense of academic excellence created an atmosphere that was both intimidating and inspiring. Dr. Morgan met them personally for a tour of the campus and Massachusetts General Hospital, explaining their vision for the Interdisciplinary Patient Care Center in detail. "We would give you complete autonomy to design the program," she told them as they visited the space that would become their research center. "You would have funding for staff, equipment, and educational materials, plus the support of the entire medical school faculty." "What about resistance from traditional medical hierarchy?" Sarah asked. "How would you handle faculty members who might not value nursing perspectives?" "That is an excellent question," Dr. Morgan said. "We are committed to changing the culture here, and we believe that starts with leadership. Your program would have the full support of the dean and the department heads." During their meetings with various faculty members and administrators, Sarah was impressed by the genuine enthusiasm for their approach to interdisciplinary care. It was clear that Harvard was serious about creating systemic change in medical education. That evening, Dr. Morgan took them to dinner at a historic restaurant in Beacon Hill, where they discussed the personal aspects of the opportunity. "I know that moving to a new city is a significant decision, especially when you're planning a wedding," Dr. Morgan said. "Boston is a wonderful place to build a life together. The medical community here is very collegial, and there are excellent opportunities for both professional and personal growth. We love Chicago," Sarah said. "But we are also excited about the possibility of having a broader impact on medical education. That is exactly what this position would offer," Dr. Morgan confirmed. "The work you would do here could influence how doctors and nurses are trained across the country." As they walked back to their hotel through the historic streets of Boston, Sarah and Ryan talked about their impressions of the day. "The resources they are offering are incredible," Ryan said. "The funding, the autonomy, the support from the medical school leadership, it is everything we could need to build a world-class program. I was impressed by how seriously they take nursing perspectives," Sarah said. "Dr. Morgan clearly understands that our research is valuable because of the interdisciplinary approach, not despite it." "How do you feel about the idea of living in Boston?" Ryan asked as they reached their hotel. Sarah looked around at the charming neighborhood, the historic architecture, and the bustling energy of the city. "I think I could be happy here," she said honestly, "especially if we were building something meaningful together." "I feel the same way," Ryan said, "but I also want to hear what Dr. Chen proposes before we make our final decision. Whatever we decide, I am grateful that we get to make this choice together," Sarah said, taking his arm as they entered the hotel lobby. "I am grateful for that too," Ryan said, kissing her temple gently. "6 months ago, I was making all my career decisions based on what would advance my individual reputation. Now I cannot imagine making important choices without considering how they affect our partnership." As they rode the elevator up to their floor, Sarah reflected on how much their relationship had changed, both of them. Ryan had learned to value collaboration and shared decision-making, while she had gained the confidence to pursue opportunities that once seemed impossible. Whatever they decided about Harvard, Sarah knew that their future would be built on the foundation of mutual respect and shared values that had made their partnership so successful. Dr. Chen's counteroffer was presented 2 days after their return from Boston, in a meeting that included the hospital's chief executive officer and the entire board of directors. "We have been doing some serious thinking about how to keep our most valuable research team at Metropolitan General File," Dr. Chen began, "and we believe we have developed a proposal that could be competitive with anything Harvard has offered." Sarah and Ryan exchanged a glance of surprise. They had not expected the hospital administration to involve the board of directors in their retention discussions. "We would like to create the Metropolitan Institute for Interdisciplinary Patient Care," announced Dr. William Harrison, the chief medical officer. "A dedicated research and education center that would be housed within our hospital, but would have the autonomy to influence medical practice nationally. You would have a budget of $2 million annually for research, education, and program development," added Margaret Foster, the hospital's chief executive officer, "plus funding for additional staff and graduate student fellowships." Sarah felt her eyes widen at the scope of what they were proposing. "The Institute would offer training programs for medical professionals from other hospitals," Dr. Chen continued. "You would be teaching interdisciplinary collaboration to doctors and nurses from across the country, just as you would at Harvard. We would also establish partnerships with nursing schools and medical schools in the Chicago area," Dr. Harrison added. "Your educational impact would extend far beyond our hospital." Ryan leaned forward in his chair. clearly intrigued by the proposal. "What about academic appointments?" he asked. "Would we have opportunities to influence medical education directly?" "We have already begun discussions with Northwestern University and the University of Illinois," Miss Foster replied. "Both schools are interested in joint appointments that would allow you to teach while maintaining your research and clinical responsibilities here." Sarah felt her mind racing as she considered the implications of what they were proposing. The opportunity to create something new at Metropolitan General, where they already had established relationships and proven success, was incredibly appealing. "This would allow us to stay in Chicago while still having a national impact on medical education," she said, thinking out loud. "Exactly," Dr. Chen confirmed. "You would have the resources and autonomy to build the program you envision, with the added advantage of working in an environment where you have already proven your effectiveness. We are also committed to ensuring that the Institute would continue to grow and evolve, even if you eventually decided to pursue other opportunities," Ms. Foster added. "This would not be dependent on your individual involvement." After the meeting concluded, Sarah and Ryan walked back to her office to process what they had just heard. "I was not expecting anything like that," Sarah said, as she settled into her desk chair. "A $2 million budget and national training programs, that is incredible." "It is a serious commitment from the hospital," Ryan agreed. "They clearly understand the value of our work and want to invest in expanding it." "How do you compare the two opportunities?" Sarah asked. "Harvard has more prestige, but Metropolitan General is offering more autonomy and resources." Ryan sat down across from her desk, his expression thoughtful. "I think both opportunities would allow us to have the impact we want on medical education and patient care," he said slowly. "The question is, which environment would allow us to do our best work?" "What do you mean?" Sarah asked. "At Harvard, we would be building something new within an established institution with centuries of tradition," Ryan explained. "That has advantages in terms of credibility and resources, but it might also mean navigating existing power structures and resistance to change. Whereas at Metropolitan General, we would be creating something completely new with the full support of the administration," Sarah said, understanding his point. "Exactly. We have already proven that we can work effectively here, and we have the trust and support of our colleagues." Sarah was quiet for several minutes, considering both opportunities and trying to determine which felt right for their future. "Can I tell you what I am thinking?" she said finally. "Of course. I am thinking that the most important factor is not prestige or resources or even geographic location," Sarah said slowly. "The most important factor is which opportunity would allow us to have the greatest impact on patient care." "What does that mean in terms of our decision?" Ryan asked. "I think it means we should choose the opportunity that allows us to implement our vision most effectively," Sarah said. "And based on what we have learned about both positions, I think that might be staying at Metropolitan General." Ryan's expression brightened with excitement. "You think we should accept Dr. Chen's offer?" "I think we should seriously consider it," Sarah said. "We already have proven success here, established relationships, and the full support of the administration. Building on that foundation might allow us to create something even more impactful than starting over at Harvard. There is something else to consider," Ryan said. "If we stay here, we can get married in Chicago, surrounded by the colleagues and friends who have supported our relationship from the beginning." Sarah felt a warm glow of happiness at the thought of having their wedding celebration with their Metropolitan General family. "I had not thought about that," she admitted. "But you are right. The people here have watched our partnership develop. They have supported our research, and they have celebrated our engagement. It would be meaningful to include them in our wedding." "So are we leaning towards staying?" Ryan asked. Sarah looked around her office, thinking about all the work they had accomplished at Metropolitan General, all the relationships they had built, and all the potential for future impact. "I think we are," she said with growing conviction. "I think we should build the Institute for Interdisciplinary Patient Care and create something that could influence medical practice for decades to come." Ryan stood up and walked around her desk, then leaned down to kiss her with a tenderness that made her heart skip a beat. "I love that we made this decision together," he said against her lips. "I love that we considered all the options and chose the path that serves our shared vision." "I love that too," Sarah said, pulling him closer. "And I love that we get to build our future here, where our story began." As they held each other in her office, surrounded by the research materials and patient advocacy work that had brought them together, Sarah felt a deep sense of contentment about the path they had chosen. They would stay at Metropolitan General, create the Institute for Interdisciplinary Patient Care, and continue building the partnership that had transformed both of their lives. They would get married in Chicago, surrounded by the colleagues who had become family, and they would spend their careers working to improve patient care through genuine collaboration between doctors and nurses. It was not the path Sarah had imagined 6 months ago when she was delivering coffee to medical conferences, but it was better than anything she could have dreamed of. She had found professional fulfillment, intellectual partnership, and a love that grew stronger with each shared decision and mutual compromise. As Ryan returned to his surgical schedule and Sarah turned back to her research work, she felt grateful for every moment that had led them to this point. From the crisis meeting where she had first challenged Ryan's arrogance to the engagement on the hospital rooftop, every step of their journey had been building toward this future they would create together. 6 months later, on a perfect May morning, Sarah stood in the bridal suite at the Drake Hotel, looking at herself in the mirror and marveling at how much her life had changed in 1 year. The woman looking back at her was confident, accomplished, and radiant with happiness, a far cry from the invisible nurse who had delivered coffee to medical conferences just 12 months earlier. "You look absolutely beautiful," said her mother, Linda Roberts, as she adjusted Sarah's veil. "Your father would be so proud to see you today." Sarah felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes as she thought about her father, who had always encouraged her to pursue her dreams and never settle for less than she deserved. "I wish he could be here to walk me down the aisle," Sarah said softly. "He is here," her mother said firmly. "In your strength, in your compassion, and in your courage to speak up for what matters. Those are the qualities he admired most about you." A knock on the door interrupted their conversation, and Marcus entered carrying a bouquet of white roses and looking elegant in his role as Sarah's maid of honor. "The groom is getting nervous," he announced with a teasing smile. "Apparently, Dr. Ryan Gray is discovering that cardiac surgery is nothing compared to wedding day jitters." "How does he look?" Sarah asked, unable to hide her excitement about seeing Ryan at the altar. "Like a man who cannot believe his good fortune," Marcus replied, "and like someone who is deeply, completely in love." The wedding ceremony was held in the hospital chapel, a small but beautiful space that held special meaning for Sarah and Ryan. They had chosen to be married at Metropolitan General because it was where their love story had begun, where they had built their partnership, and where they would continue their work together. The guest list included their colleagues from the hospital, their families, and the patients whose lives had been touched by their collaborative approach to care. Isabella Rodriguez and her father Eduardo sat in the front row, along with Dr. Chen and the other medical staff who had supported their relationship from the beginning. As Sarah walked down the aisle on the arm of Dr. Chen, who had graciously agreed to give her away in her father's absence, she saw Ryan waiting for her at the altar. He looked handsome and nervous and completely perfect in his black tuxedo, and when their eyes met, his face lit up with a smile that made her heart race with love and anticipation. "Dearly beloved," began the minister, "we are gathered here today to celebrate the marriage of Sarah Elizabeth Roberts and Ryan Michael Gray, two people who have found in each other not only love and companionship, but also the perfect partner for building a meaningful life together." The ceremony was simple and elegant, focused on the vows that Sarah and Ryan had written for each other. When it came time for them to speak, Ryan went first, his voice strong and clear despite the emotion she could see in his green eyes. "Sarah," he said, taking her hands in his, "1 year ago, you challenged my arrogance and changed my life. You saw potential in me that I did not know existed, and you had the courage to speak up when everyone else remained silent. You saved Isabella's life with your wisdom, and you saved my soul with your compassion." Sarah felt tears streaming down her cheeks as Ryan continued, "You have taught me that the best medicine comes from collaboration, that the greatest achievements come from partnership, and that true love is built on mutual respect and shared values. I promise to support your dreams, to value your insights, and to build a future with you that serves something larger than ourselves." When it was Sarah's turn, she looked into Ryan's eyes and spoke from her heart. "Ryan," she said, her voice trembling with emotion, "you saw value in me when I could not see it in myself. You listened to my ideas when others dismissed them. You supported my career when others questioned my qualifications, and you loved me not despite my ambitions, but because of them." She paused to collect herself, overwhelmed by the magnitude of the commitment they were making. "You have shown me that love is not about changing someone, but about helping them become the best version of themselves. I promise to challenge you to keep growing, to support your transformation, and to build a partnership with you that makes the world a better place." When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Ryan kissed Sarah with a tenderness and passion that made the entire congregation burst into applause. As they walked back down the aisle together, hand in hand, Sarah felt as though her heart might burst with happiness. The reception was held in the hospital's conference center, transformed with flowers and candlelight into a beautiful celebration space. During dinner, Dr. Chen stood up to offer a toast that brought tears to Sarah's eyes. "6 months ago," Dr. Chen said, "Sarah Roberts asked a simple question that saved a child's life and changed our understanding of patient care. Today, Dr. and Dr. Gray, yes, Sarah, you will always be Dr. Gray to me, begin a partnership that will influence medical practice for generations to come." She raised her glass to the newlyweds. "To Sarah and Ryan, who have shown us that the best medicine and the best love both come from seeing the whole person, listening with compassion, and building something beautiful together." Later in the evening, as Sarah and Ryan shared their first dance to "At Last" by Etta James, she marveled at how perfectly their life had come together. "How does it feel to be married to me?" Ryan asked, as they swayed together on the dance floor. "It feels like coming home," Sarah said, looking up into his green eyes. "Like everything in my life has been leading to this moment." "I feel the same way," Ryan said, pulling her closer, "like I was incomplete until I found you." "What are you most excited about for our future?" Sarah asked. "Everything," Ryan said with a smile. "Building the institute, influencing medical education, traveling together for conferences, growing old together, maybe having children someday, all of it." "Children?" Sarah asked, surprised by the mention. "Only if you want them," Ryan said quickly. "But I think we would raise remarkable children, children who would grow up understanding the value of collaboration and compassion." "I would love to have children with you," Sarah said softly. "Maybe in a few years, once we have established the institute. There is no rush, Ryan said. We have our whole lives ahead of us. As they continued dancing, surrounded by their friends and colleagues, Sarah felt a profound sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought them to this moment. From a crisis meeting, where she had been dismissed as irrelevant, to a wedding celebration where she was honored as a pioneering researcher, every step had been building toward this future they would create together. The Institute for Interdisciplinary Patient Care had officially opened the previous month, with Sarah as the director and Ryan as the co-director. They had already received applications from medical professionals across the country who wanted to participate in their training programs, and several medical schools had expressed interest in incorporating their curriculum into their standard education. But beyond the professional achievements, Sarah was most grateful for the love she had found with Ryan. He had transformed from an arrogant surgeon who dismissed her insights to a man who valued her perspective and supported her dreams. Together, they had built a partnership based on mutual respect, shared values, and genuine affection. As the evening drew to a close and they prepared to leave for their honeymoon in Italy, Sarah took one last look around the reception hall. Isabella Rodriguez was dancing with her father, Dr. Chen was laughing with Marcus, and their colleagues were celebrating the love story that had begun in a hospital conference room and culminated in this perfect day. "Ready to start our new life together, Mrs. Gray?" Ryan asked, offering her his arm. "Ready," Sarah said, taking his hand and feeling the weight of her new wedding ring alongside her engagement ring. "More than ready." As they walked out of the hospital where their love story had begun, Sarah knew that their future would be filled with meaningful work, continued growth, and a love that would only deepen with time. They had found something precious and rare, a partnership that made both of them better doctors, better researchers, and better people. The arrogant surgeon and the dismissed nurse had become partners in medicine and in life, proving that the greatest achievements come not from individual brilliance, but from the courage to listen, learn, and build something beautiful together. And as they drove away into their future, Sarah smiled at the knowledge that their story would continue to inspire others to value collaboration, respect different perspectives, and never underestimate the power of a simple question asked with courage and compassion. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.